Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I've been married to Kathy for 15 years. We have 3 kids, Evan, Derek, and Lila, and a nice house in a good school district. Our lives are comfortable, 2 newer cars, and my wife has the luxury of working for a nonprofit because we don't really need the extra income. I have a job that interests me. The workload's eased up in the last few years, and my hours are reasonable. I travel occasionally, both for work and pleasure. On the surface, everything's great. Good family, a stable home, the 2-car garage. What else could I possibly want? But then, one evening after work, I came home to find Kathy sitting at the kitchen table looking nervous. "Hey, what's going on? Is everything okay with the kids?" I asked, immediately worried. She looked at me, her face tight with tension. "They're fine, Ryan," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But I have some really bad news. I'm leaving you. I'm going to marry Henry Caldwell." I froze. "What? Who's Henry Caldwell? What does he have that I don't? Do you love him?" She nodded, her eyes sad. "I do love him. We've been seeing each other for about a year now. He's the governor's cousin, on the side of the family that inherited most of the fortune. The kids and I are going to move in with him." That name hit me like a ton of bricks. Henry Caldwell? That Caldwell? Are you serious? You've been seeing him for a year and I never knew? What the hell is going on? I was stunned. My whole world had just crumbled. It's true then. The husband is the last to know. Well, I guess I made it easy for you. Me trusting you implicitly. Are the children mine? Of course they are. How could you think that of me? Oh, yes, they are yours. She was nice looking, but not a stunner. And nothing out of the ordinary in bed. Unless she must have worked a lot harder to please him than she ever did with me. But what's the point? The pain was turning to a bitter anger, but I was able to keep control of myself. I guess I've been screwing a $1 million hooker. I glared at her, jumped to my feet, and gestured towards the door. "Well, get the hell out of my house, and don't let the door hit your butt on the way out. You goddamn cheating woman. Enjoy the good life, until he dumps you for someone younger. I have nothing more to say to you." She tossed an envelope on the table and moved quickly out the door, and I sat and cried. I went upstairs to lie down, and saw that the children's rooms had been emptied out, including the pictures they had hung on the walls. It felt like I was living in a tomb. In the weeks to follow, she and Henry Caldwell refused to let me talk with my kids. It was Lila who snuck out and knocked on my door. We worked out a clandestine meeting arrangement. I got 6 burner phones and gave the kids one of the numbers. Every couple of weeks I gave them a new number, so if anyone checked their phones, my numbers were only called occasionally. We were careful about emails, which could only be sent from the library computers or a friend's computer, making sure that I use a fake name to hide from my ex. So, I kept up with their lives, not as often as I would like, while Lila called every other day, and the boys about once or twice a week. In the months that followed, it didn't get better. Words cannot describe the fury, hurt, depression that washed over me, that was drowning me. Kathy had traded up in marriage, so far up that she didn't bother to ask for any of our assets, alimony, or child support. There was no point. I guess, to her credit, she asked for nothing of any commercial value. But what she did take was priceless: my 3 children. We sometimes read stories where a woman is offered $1 million to have sex with some guy. Usually it's women we wonder about, the assumption being that most guys would do it for free. The goofy part of that question is, who would pay $1 million for sex, especially for sex with an average person? I guess that Caldwell has tens of millions of dollars, so I can see her bailing for that. Who knows, maybe it was love. I can say for sure I wouldn't have run off with a Mrs. Caldwell, but I suppose you don't know until someone offers. And the kids too, hiding contact with me. I guess it's the money too, the promise of a free Ivy League educations, along with the more immediate pleasures of the lifestyle big money can bring. Cars, clothes, skiing in Aspen, summer in France, doesn't compare with surf fishing at the Jersey Shore with Pop, but neither does it excuse my children for not insisting on having a foot in each camp. I thought I brought them up better than that, but then they are kids. The biggest thing was still, what the hell did Caldwell see in her? She really didn't stand out in any crowd I could imagine. She was middling in about everything. She was really good with people, but so are a lot of people. As to our friends, most stayed cordial, but now being single, occasionally I was asked to a party, and I did have a couple of buddies to fish with, but I was really lonely without my best friend, and I felt like damaged goods, which I was. I thought of suing them, but my lawyer told me to forget it, that I really didn't have a chance. And for what? I make good money, $130,000 a year, which is a nice living, but against Caldwell? So, I caved and tried to get on with my life. Like I said, in that wrenched first year I really had a hard time. My home was now just a house. Functionally, I was on the very edge of my children's lives. I wasn't fit to date women either. Really, it was my daughter that got me through that horrible year. I kept it together by immersing myself in work. I mean, what else could I do? I felt sorry for myself, buried in self-pity, rolled in misery like a dog in shit for almost a year. After 6 months of that, I sold the damn house and got an apartment in town, cut way back on overtime, and began to flesh out ideas I had come up with over the years, but were ignored by the elderly guys in management. I realized I was a better businessman than the fools running the company. Ever see clearly the way for the business to grow and prosper, but the management couldn't let go of the old business model they developed years ago, which successfully built the business, but was wrong for today's world and was taking it down? It was like I was sailing on the Titanic with me, the only one who could see the iceberg. What could you do besides dress warmly and stand near the lifeboats, reading the launch instructions? My job search was producing nothing, until out of the blue, I got a job interview from a company that bought one of our smaller competitors. They wanted me to implement my employer's old business model so they could grow their company. In a series of interviews, I pointed out the problems with that and outlined my own ideas. They were actually willing to pay a premium to lure me away from Titanic Incorporated and more besides because their business was in Chestertown, Maryland. I was able to negotiate a big vacation package by agreeing to take most of it 1 day a week and a contract tied to business growth and profits. Apparently, they had had trouble getting people to relocate to a backwater. Charming or not, Chestertown is as chaotic in the summer as it is dead in the winter. I jumped at the chance to make a clean break of it, changed my email address, got a new phone number. Of course my children knew, but not their mother. Of course, in this age of the internet, if you live your life, you cannot really disappear, but I thought of it as a way to reinvent myself, as neither my former employer nor my former wife valued me, and it helped to put them in the fuzzy light of the past. Now, I didn't get big-time rich like Caldwell, but I did real well by my standards, and as the business took off, I was able to hire talented young people to implement the business plan. After a few years, I found myself with a nice equity position and began working from home a lot and let others do the day-to-day stuff. I rented a place for a while until I found a big 3-bedroom craftsman-style bungalow on a lot with a view, but within walking distance of Chesterton. The big demand here is for old historic homes, but houses from the 1920, 1930 are modern houses and pretty reasonably priced. As a bonus, it had $20,000 of woodworking tools and a heated garage that the old guy bought new when he retired, but never got around to learning how to use. I joined the local historical society, volunteered for this and that, put myself out there, as they say, but unfortunately, the selection of suitable mates was thin. I was 45 years old, relatively few single women in the 35 to 40 age group, and of the few of a suitable age. Well, I'll get shot for saying this, but the education level of the year-round residents was mixed, and the summer people were generally too high-end for my taste. One of the members of the Historical Society asked me if I could fix an electrical problem on his boat. I liked the old guy, so he and I spent Saturday on the boat, and I fixed a plethora of assorted problems. We took it out for a short cruise, and I found I liked sailing, and he liked company, so he taught me sailing. We worked out a trade. I'd keep all the mechanical/electrical stuff running. He's pay someone to the endless cosmetic restoration and cleaning, and I could take it out more or less at will. I just had to call in advance. If it was a day's sail, often as not we would go out together. I should tell you that I could have bought the damn boat, but I'm cheap, and who wants the expense of owning and maintaining a boat? I was at the marina changing the oil in the auxiliary engine, and heard hoots and shrieks as a boat was ineptly wallowing up to the dock. I grabbed a boat hook and trotted over. Seeing the run of the tide, I called for the stern rope. They threw it short, but I could just hook it and pulled the stern to the dock, whereupon in the tide pushed the bow in so I could catch that rope which was dragging in the water and tie them fast. The idiot at the wheel was drunkenly insisting I join their party for dinner at one of the expense account restaurants nearby. I had no interest in spending the evening with a bunch of honking drunks and politely demurred when a really good-looking woman came up beside Captain Rum. "Don't be put off by Wallace. I would like you to come to dinner with us. After all, you rescued us. So much you can infer from a sentience." She was sober, no rings on her left hand, nice-looking, educated, faint British accent, with a body built for comfort. "Now would you be sitting alongside me at dinner?" Hoots of teasing laughter from the boat. "He hooked the boat, and you hooked him. Way to go, Heather." We were smitten with each other. Heather was 7 years younger than me, worked in a law office in Washington, D.C., writing laws and regulations for lobbyists. She was a gorgeous thing, not Hollywood gorgeous, but somebody I certainly would pick out of a crowd. As we talked, I found she shared my politics, love of old things, the water, and reading. She couldn't have children, which bothered her years ago when she got the news, but over the years became reconciled with it. Me, after the experience I had with mine, that didn't bother me at all. Heather, I don't want this night to end. No strings here. Would you stay at my house? I've a guest bedroom with a locking door. Not that you need to. Got your driver's license with you? Give it to me? I handed it over. She took a picture of it with her phone, emailed it. There, if I don't come back in one piece, my mother will come after you. Can you drive me to Waldorf Sunday night? Sure. Where's Waldorf? No cabs around the restaurant, but I waved to a couple of older women I knew fairly well who were just leaving, and I asked them if they could drop us off at the marina where my car was. One of them had set me up with 2 blind dates and was delighted to see I was sweet on Heather. After the introductions to Grace and Eulalia, who prefers to be called Lily, they teased Heather. Lily started in. Ryan is a real asset to the town. I try to fix him up with a local girl or two, but my mistake was not being able to find anybody who looks as lovely as you. We want to keep him here, so when you marry him, you have to agree to live here. Grace chimed in. He can cook, fix anything, and has a good income. Plus, he's nice to sweet old ladies. Heather gave it right back. Well, if he's been rejected by all of the young women around here, maybe I should be careful. They must know something I don't. Lily. Or more likely you recognize what you've got there. Bathes regularly, but a very disheveled dresser. He does need taking care of. Ladies, please, I just met Heather this afternoon. You'll scare her away. We didn't have sex that weekend, but the next weekend, we took the boat out, and we drilled like rabbits as both of us were ending a long dry spell. Physically, she was the opposite of my ex-wife. The ex was short, skinny, and blonde. Heather was almost as tall as me, nicely rounded body and jet black-haired. She was English, her father from Avery, England, and her mother from Madras, India. Best of all, we laughed at each other's jokes. Unfortunately, she was also the polar opposite of my ex-wife in not so good ways. Kathy was willing to try anything you ever read about or saw in a corn film, and willing to do it a lot. Heather liked sex, but she was pretty uptight. I was puzzled because she talked a good game, but was really limited in bed, and it wasn't getting any better. I had no trouble getting her to pleasure, but she thought BJ dirty talk, outdoor sex, and just about everything else was perverted or disrespectful to her personally. I was about to reluctantly toss her back into the dating pool when I got an inspiration one cold, wet day in the fall. We walking into Chesterton one Saturday, and I realized that she was the only woman in the town still wearing sandals. I wondered if she had a foot fetish. I got 2 drinks in her that evening at the restaurant and a glass of wine at the house, so she was pretty laid back. Heather, some people feel that sex can be gross or humiliating, and that loving people should be dignified when in bed together. I think my job is to do for you whatever you enjoy, and that your job is to do for me whatever I enjoy. Ryan, don't you like making love with me? What are you talking about? What we do, you and I, is love-making. You're good at that. But there's also lusty drilling and sex play, and we haven't done anything like that. Tonight, I'd like to do that. Well, we did just that. This year the weather was remarkable mild. Well into October, and our romance was perhaps the happiest time for me in decades. Once a week, weather permitting, we'd sail on Chesapeake Bay. Often it was warm enough to shed our clothes for a while, with nary another boat in sight, and have a beer, swim, and generally screw hard once or twice, and snuggling under a blanket as the boat rocked us to sleep, and then to make love in the cool dawn. That fall we fell in love. Our town is 150 years away from D.C. in lifestyle, but only an hour and a half by car. That winter, she sold her Waldorf condo and rented a pied-a-terre in D.C., moving in with me in Chesterton. She has a somewhat flexible schedule, and most weeks spent a couple of nights in D.C. and the rest with me. I proofread her stuff not so much for spelling and grammar, but for clarity and completeness. I would be bullshitting to say that I truly understood everything she wrote, but in the moment I could follow it, and if I couldn't, there was a problem with it. She was a bit more social than me, but I like people too, and we both enjoyed going out with her friends in town. Mine near home, and life was good. She had to head into D.C. one Sunday morning to prep for a case, and as luck would have it, the town council meeting I was attending wrapped up earlier than expected on Monday. So, I decided to surprise her by driving to her apartment. I got there around 9:30, but there was no sign of her. I called, but it went straight to voicemail. Given the mess I'd just come out of with Andrea, my ex, I'll admit it made me uneasy. She called back about an hour later. Sorry, just taking a quick break, she said. I'll be working half the night. What's up? We chatted for a bit, and I was trying to figure out how to ask her where she was. Before I could, she volunteered the info. Well, it's turning into a hell of a week, she said with a sigh. We found out Sunday that our Chicago office didn't do a damn thing on the federal truck standards. So this morning, The whole team packed up and came to the Westin in Fairfax to get it all wrapped up by 2 p.m. tomorrow. I'll be lucky if I sleep at all tonight. The only good news is I'll be back in Chesterton a day earlier than planned. Her voice had that familiar mix of exhaustion and determination, and for a moment, I forgot about everything else. She was so damn driven, always on the move. Oh good. Actually, the council meeting ended early, so I thought I'd surprise you. I'm at the apartment. Oh, you poor thing. Spend the night. I should be back about noon or 1. We can have lunch. I'd normally take you up on that, but I need to get back in the morning, and you'll be exhausted. Honey, I'm so sorry I missed you. At least I'll catch your scent when I slide between the sheets. I'll be missing you. I'll take a long nap at the apartment tomorrow and be home in time for a late supper. I love you. A week later, she said. I realized I have to shut my phone off a lot when I'm in meetings, or just so I can concentrate, but then I don't know who is calling, so I got a smartphone for just you and me. We can set it up so you can track me, that way you'll know where I am. I don't need to know that. I trust you. She laughed, and I trust you as well, but I have no secrets from you, and you never know. That phone feature may come in handy sometime for some other reason. So she gave me the gift of knowledge, which wasn't so good for Adam and Eve, but for me, I checked where she was a few times and never bothered again. We had had the biblical 7 years of good luck, and I wondered if it was coming to an end when I opened my door one Saturday morning to be greeted by my ex-wife. I wrinkled my nose and said, "You're dead to me," as I shut the door. Of course Heather heard what happened. Who was that? My ex-wife. I told her to F off, but now she's was knocking again. On how nice, invite her in. I told her she was dead and shut the door on her. Heather glared at me. It's my house too, and you'll be nice to her if only because she's a guest in our house. Things are obviously going very poorly for her, or she wouldn't be here. Heather smiled as she opened the door. My husband tells me you're Kathy. How nice to finally meet you. I'm Heather, by the way. I looked at her more carefully and shivered a little. Kathy was always thin, but now she looked gaunt with sunken eyes and cheeks. My first thought was, what the hell did I ever see in her? And the second had me wondering if she was seriously ill. Kathy looked at me warily and said, I'm sorry to intrude. I won't be long. Heather slid right in with, don't worry about that. We're staying at home this afternoon. We were thinking of going out, but Ryan has some yard work to get done. I'm putting water on. I do so want to talk with you. Did you have a pleasant drive down? I took the hint and went outside. Call me when the coffees dripped and left them to themselves. It must have been 20 minutes later Heather called. Coffee's ready. I had put the last quart of oil in the mower and went in the house to clean my hands and pour a coffee. I sat with them as they finished their chatter. Peace came over me. I realized thankfully that I had no feelings for Kathy at all. No love, no hate, zero emotions of any consequence, and looking at the two of them, I could honestly say I was well rid of her. The coffee mugs were finally empty. So after all these years, Kathy, I don't suppose this is a social call. No, it isn't. You have 2 daughters. The youngest is 7 years old and needs a kidney transplant. Jesus, what a bombshell. No. Of course I knew she and Caldwell had daughter, but mine? Can't be. You don't say. That's too bad, but as you know I've never met this child. So why don't you go to Switzerland or wherever money can buy everything and fix her? That's got nothing to do with me. So for the second time, why are you here? My husband's shooting blanks and, handing me an envelope, I knew you would be doubtful. So I got the DNA reports. I didn't have a sample of your DNA, but all of your children have the same father. She's your flesh and blood. We're having trouble finding a kidney match, and she in total kidney failure. Ryan, she won't live all that long, and the doctors think you're likely a match. I'm not, or I wouldn't be here. I'm here to ask you to be checked for a match, and if so to save her life by donating a kidney. I'll pay you anything you ask. Heather saw me starting to go orbital and put her hand on my arm, squeezed hard, and jumped in. We need to discuss this. Why don't you email us the detailed information and we'll discuss it and get back to you. Every day she's suffering. Kathy, let me talk to Ryan. I'll call you the day after tomorrow. I promise. Heather stood up and rummaged in the desk for one of my business cards. As Kathy was leaving, I couldn't help saying sarcastically, it was nice to hear how the number of my ex-children is multiplying. Do let me know if any more pop out. Drive carefully on your way back to where you came from. I shut the door while Heather walked Kathy to the car talking earnestly. I reheated a cup of coffee thinking the nerve of the witch to rub her money in my face and went out to my shop. Heather called me couple hours later for supper. Well, there's what I'd call a troubled woman. Her child is dying, facing a slow death, and the only best hope is a big-time favor from a guy who hates her. And that weren't enough. Her marriage is shaky. That about sum it up? I don't hate her, I just despise her, and I don't despise her for dumping me, but rather for depriving me of my children, and depriving my children of me. She thinks she has it rough facing the loss of a kid. Okay, my kids aren't dead, but they might as well be because they aren't really a part of my life. You think the kid's really mine? I doubt she'd lie about that. I imagine you'll find out pretty quickly if they check you for a kidney match. Shit, I gotta read up on that. I really don't know nothing about kidney disease, transplants, or anything like that. You make her any promises? Just what you heard me say about calling her Tuesday. The child is stable, but not good. And Ryan, I'll support you, whatever comes. I got looking up on Wikipedia, the National Kidney Foundation website, and found that the kid eventually dies without a new kidney. There is a huge shortage of kidneys. The best outcome is if the donor is a close match to the recipient. The kid would probably get a transplant at some point, but it would be a miserable time for her until she got one, and she might still die of kidney failure. Sunday night, I poured Heather a glass of the good wine we save for company, not the usual plunk we have on the table. You realize I would love to kick that woman to the curb and throw her under a bus. She hasn't changed a bit. Had she not absolutely needed me, she never would have told me about my daughter. But I have to do this. You know that, don't you? This what? Throw her under the bus or donate a kidney. We both laughed. It broke the tension. Love, I wish the kid was okay. I wish your children were part of our lives, and I wish you got to keep both kidneys. But if I had a child, I know I'd do anything I needed to do to save her, and I know you feel the same way. So I understand why you need to give her your kidney. I saw that strength, that courage, and loyalty in you before I married you. I was thinking, so, she handed us a way out, didn't she? A free pass, I said, my voice low with frustration. But what do I want out of all this? Right now, it feels like all the pain and fallout is landing on me, and my daughter too. How do I get the ex and her husband to take some of the heat, to put something into this mess? I don't know why you'd care about that, she replied, shaking her head. Forget about them for now. Focus on what you want. Do you even know what that is? I paused, thinking about it for a moment. No, I guess I never really thought about it. Do you know what you want? She gave a soft chuckle, patted my arm, and smiled. That's a question only you can answer. I leaned back, looking out the window, lost in thought. I was thinking, when the boys were growing up, I was so caught up in working, bringing home the money, fixing up the house, the cars, that I never really got to enjoy them. And then they were gone. So now, I've got this daughter I don't even know. I want to be a part of her life. I want to be there for her, to have my picture taken with her on prom night. They still do proms, right? Heather nodded in agreement, though she seemed unsure where I was going with it. I want to raise her like I should have raised my older kids. That's what I want. There was a long silence before she spoke again, her tone serious. Jesus, Ryan, you're thinking about custody, aren't you? She'll never give you that. And honestly, it'd be traumatic for Maria too. I mean, I'd love to have my own daughter on weekends, but it's a lot to ask of anyone. I sighed deeply, knowing the road ahead would be far from easy. But for the first time in a while, I felt clear about what I wanted. I think she might give us custody. Remember the judgment of Solomon? 2 women claim a child. Solomon decided to cut the kid in half, one half for each claimant. One woman agreed, the other renounced her claim, rather than the child die. Solomon declared her the mother. Kathy will do the same, but I want her to have to work for it. Ryan, you don't believe that. You can't make custody a condition of donating a kidney. A kidney for the kid for a kidney. What are you thinking? Lot of thoughts running around in my mind right now. You're right, I can't require custody as a quid pro quo. The kid gets my kidney, but I was thinking Kathy doesn't have to know that. I had worked hard to push the rage out of my heart years ago, and did a good job of it too, but seeing Kathy and the secret child, it came flooding back. I wanted revenge on Kathy too, but I didn't tell Heather that. That night we worked out the framework of a deal, and one of the lawyers Heather worked with offered to work it up into something nice, legal, and enforceable. Just before we went up to Greenville, I added a page at the end. Took me almost 20 minutes to find the same font the goddamn lawyers used. I wanted everything to match. Monday, she called Miriam and set up a family meeting between us, Miriam, her husband Henry, and my 3 older children. We stipulated that Maria not be present, which was only common sense. I went up the day before for a tissue match, which proved she was my daughter, and that I was an excellent match for a kidney donation. While I was doing all that, Heather spent the better part of the day visiting with Kathy and the children, and they got along quite well. The next day, Heather and I sat down with the Caldwells. Henry was clearly annoyed at the whole thing. Kathy was sick with worry, and my other kids weren't much better. They did look good, wearing quality clothing, expensive haircuts, perfect teeth. Well, I read up on all this, and the Kidney Foundation is a really good charity. I'd like to see them come out ahead on this. So it turns out that you were correct, Kathy. Maria is my daughter, and the good news is that I'm a good match to donate a kidney for her. But what you are asking me to do is to undergo major surgery, pop out one of my kidneys, and give it to a stranger. But she's your child, said my ex-wife. No, she's the child of Henry and Kathy Caldwell. I waved towards them. You all left my life abruptly and for good. And none of you ever told me about Maria until you absolutely had to. I have every reason to expect you'll cloister Maria away from me as well, just as soon as you get your pound of flesh out of me. Plus, this is all on me. Not one of you will have shed a drop of blood, not a minute of pain. I mean, you folks don't have any skin in the game, do you? Sorry, but the continuation of my genes isn't that big a deal in my life. Kathy's face was contorted in anguish. There has to be a way. We'll do anything to save her. Anything you want. I paused a bit for dramatic effect. What will it take, you ask? Well, two things. For one, I want some time with my daughter. 72 days a year. 20% her time she'll live with Heather and I. Kathy, would you think that's fair? What's that? 2 weekends a month? Well, that'd be 48 days, so add a week or two in the summer, that's about 15% of the time. So, okay, I would get her 15% of the time and you 85% of the time. Okay, so you agree that would be fair. She looked at her husband, who shrugged and said, more than fair. I think so too. We agree on that. Now consider what I will be going through. Perfectly healthy, getting cut open and an organ removed to help someone else live. How many of you, in my place, would be willing to do what you are asking me to do? Raise your hand. The three women's hands shot up, my two sons a few seconds later, and hesitantly Henry's hand. So you'd all be willing to do what you want me to do? They looked at each other, nodding. Then we have the makings of a deal that will help the Kidney Foundation too. On one day, Kathy and I will donate kidneys, one to Maria and one to the transplant program. And when I come out of surgery, Henry goes in to donate a kidney to the foundation as well. When that happens, Maria gets my kidney. I get custody of Maria. What do we say? 15% of the time. That seems fair to us all. How's that sound? You two will be written up in the paper as heroes. Henry saw a distinction. You'll take credit for it all. What's credit to me? You can say it was your idea. You're all the more noble because your donation is going to strangers, not to kin. Everybody nodded. They were good with it, but Henry didn't look all that happy. I gave him a verbal poke. You okay with this, Jim? He quickly put on his public happy face mask. Sure, it's a good thing to do, and it helps lots of people. So why not? Kathy? They all smiled and nodded. Kathy gushed. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Ryan. You don't know what this means to me. You're wrong about that, Kathy. I do know what this means to you. In fact, more than you realize. But we all agree that Kathy, Henry, and I will donate a kidney. Nodding all around. Okay, so here's the contract for you all to sign. There is a penalty clause on the next to last page, which is my second condition, and Kathy and Henry have to initial it and date it. Henry got serious in a hurry. What the hell's this about a contract? We're all family here, that's not called for, and I for one won't sign. My replacement was grating on my nerves, the pompous prick. We're all a family here, Jimmy, only like the interlocking Olympic rings. Different families, my wife and are a family, and you, Kathy, and the children are a family, and the children, Kathy and myself, are a biological family. So the family bit is sort of muddled. The nice thing about contracts is everybody knows what they are agreeing to in advance. And the penalty clause. If for any reason either of you cannot or will not donate a kidney, Heather and I get custody of Maria. She takes my last name. And the custody figures, which we all agreed were fair, are reversed. We get her 85% of the time. You get her 15% of the time. Of course, we'll ease into this. But if one of your reneges, she'll be registered in the spring for school in Chestertown. Pandemonium. I had to raise my voice. People. If you all go through with the deal, you get what you all agreed was exactly what you all felt was fair. Only if one of you Welches, do I get custody of just one. Just one, mind you. Just one of my 4 children. Let's not be greedy here. Kathy spoke up. We'll take it. Maria lives. That is the big thing here. It's what we all want. It's win-win. She grabbed a pen and signed. Henry balked. So, Jeff, what happens if you don't go through with it? Kathy and I donate kidneys. You do nothing and Maria dies. I smiled. Good thinking, Jimmy. Of course, I come out of surgery before you go in, but there might be a problem of some sort. Here's a letter from the Kidney Foundation that in return for 2 kidneys donated to the foundation, They will put Maria at the head of the list. But you have my word I will go through with it. What more assurance can I give but my word? Kathy was melting down. Sign it, Henry. For our daughter's sake. Henry was hesitant. I'm not sure she's... Kathy jumped on him. Shut up. There's no good way to finish that thought. Sign the goddamn thing. A week later, Kathy went under the knife. And as soon as the surgeon took a piss and changed his scrubs, they cut into me. After I came out of the anesthetic in the ICU, they moved me to a private hospital room. Heather had been with me in the ICU, but as soon as I was settled in the private room, she and Lila came in talking with each other. I got an update on Kathy, and Heather telling me the doctor said I was fine. Lila looked me in the eye and told me she regretted how Henry and Kathy had tried to demonize me. Dad. It was like some kind of almost cult thinking. Like a sacrifice we needed to make for the future. I mean, it's stupid on the face of it now, but we were kids and Henry and Mom, they were all on a different planet. She started crying. I'd hold you in my arms and hug you, but I'm not up to it at the moment. Heather was right there. I can hug you, Lila. I forgive you and your dad as well. Come on. You were a kid then, and you did what you could. But in the future, Ryan and I want you to be an integral part of our life. My son Evan came in the door at that point. Good, you're awake. I'm going to donate a kidney too. I signed up for it while you were under. Henry bailed. By the way, he's postponed it into the indefinite future, but it'll never happen. Gee, Evan, I don't know, is that such a good idea? You've got your whole life ahead of you. I don't know. You don't have to, you know. The deal is done. Your kidney doesn't let him off of the hook. That had nothing to do with it. Maria gets to live with you guys. That's all to the good. I think Maria will be better off. I just gave my word. I said I'd do it. I mean, if my mother and my father could do it, and it is a good thing to do, you know? I've been watching Maria suffer, and as I understand it, they may be able to split my kidney and help 2 people. You had Jimmy figured out, didn't you, Dad? You knew he wouldn't go through with it, and he absolutely hates to be called Jimmy. We'd get grounded for 2 weeks calling him that. Heather was looking at me as it dawned on her how I engineered this thing. I figured he wouldn't give anybody a pound of flesh, but I didn't want to admit it. But better yet, he would be the goat for Kathy losing her daughter. I really don't know Jimbo at all, never laid eyes on him until a week ago. He does seem like a bit of a stuffed shirt. He's not one of us, is he, Dad? You tell me. He may be nothing to me, but I rather think he loves you too. That week began the rest of my life. At first, when we had Maria for the weekends, one of her brothers or her sister would bring her down, and often enough the 2 of them would stay the day, returning in late evening, and the wife or I would take her home Sunday. Pretty soon we had them, Maria and whoever drove her down for the whole weekend. When that all went well, we went a Thursday night to Sunday night. Often enough I had my friend's boat, so we sailed and fished and swam all summer. We took Maria and her sister on vacation seeing the sights of Washington, D.C., and then took the boys on the same tour. We extended the trips an extra day because we couldn't get the kids out of the Smithsonian. At the end of summer, Kathy came down with Maria. The 2 of us chatted. She was more relaxed and happier than I could ever remember. Heather gave us some time together. Ryan, you know Henry and I aren't getting along well, don't you? No, actually I didn't. Heather and I are going great though. Maybe you ought to chat with her. You guys must have done something right in years past. The kids turned out well. Henry hasn't really done much in the parenting department, you know? He was more of an older playmate than a father. Yeah, well, I guess it put a lot on you and the help. From the little I've seen of him, he's not one for sacrifice and hard work. Well, with enough money, you can sit around and fritter your time away, I guess. Did you intend to drive a wedge between us? Kathy, when you bailed on me, you didn't give 2 shits about me. And now I really didn't give a thought to you. First of all, like you, I wanted Maria to live a normal life, and secondly, I wanted my children back in my life. I am willing to share, but I resented greatly that you yourself would not. More than the divorce, I resented that. Well, that's all water under the bridge. I'm good with it now. So, what's your problem with him? By him reneging, I lost Maria, my baby, and now he's cheating on me too. I damn near choked, which morphed into a chuckle and the look on her face. I started hearty laughter. You worthless woman. You were happy enough when you were cheating on your husband and denying him his children, weren't you? You really expect sympathy from me? Turnabout is fair play. Well, believe me, I really do know how you feel, and agree no one should have to give up a child. Better line up a good divorce lawyer. You'll still be rich, or is there a prenup? She started to laugh too. Ryan, you can get me laughing. Yes, turnabout is justice, but justice doesn't feel good for my end. There is a prenup, but yes, I'll be rich. But not happy. That last bit is on you. Somewhere along the line, you missed an essential fact of life. You have to find out what makes you happy, and then find someone who will enable you to do whatever it is that makes you happy. Only you can figure it out and make it happen. So what if Henry is not the man? Cut your losses and develop an exit strategy. Do what you did last time. Start looking, and when you find someone to be with you, someone to help you through the divorce, at least, dump your second husband and marry your third. You're well preserved. Skinny is still in fashion. You've got money. You play golf, tennis, and probably still great in bed. What are you lacking? Seriously, give Heather a call. Whatever she did when her husband left her worked for her. She can at least commensurate with you more than I can. I started laughing again. I couldn't help myself. Kathy left in late afternoon. Later, Heather, Maria, and I walked into town for supper and back home. That night in bed, I told Heather about our conversation. So, you told her Henry was just doing to her what she did to you? That wasn't nice, and she stifled a laugh. You think she was making a run at you? That's an old-time phrase, isn't it? Make a run at you. Don't be silly. She sees how happy I am. How much you and I love each other. Besides, I told her to talk with you. That whatever you did after your divorce worked out fine for you. She can rot in hell for all I care. I went on to tell her how much I love you. Heather and I had as grand a time that night as one could have and not wake Maria. Kathy eventually moved to Florida and invited all of us down for Thanksgiving one year. She had the dinner catered, and honestly, it was awful. Nothing like the home-cooked meals we used to have. After that, the kids started alternating between spending Christmas with her and New Year's with us. We also made it a point to all get together for a big 4th of July picnic in Chestertown. The kids kept in touch with Henry, and to be fair, he took care of them financially. As for me, I only saw Henry twice after that. Once at Lila's wedding, and again at Evan's. When Derek married Ella, we held the ceremony in Chestertown, but Henry didn't even respond to the invitation. To his credit, though, he did send them a check a couple of weeks later. Kathy, on the other hand, well, she spent a fortune on plastic surgery over the years, trying to hold onto her looks. But no amount of surgery can change what's inside, and over time, she grew bitter and envious. Eventually, the kids decided it would be easier if she visited each of them for the holidays, rather than all of them visiting her. That way, each one took their turn with her, but none of them had to deal with her too often. They tell me she's had a string of lovers over the years, but none of them stuck around for long. It hasn't been a happy life for her. As for me and mine, we're good. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
My wife cheated on me with her boss, but I moved on to happiness while she lost it all. Yes, my wife cheated on me, and indeed she left me for another man. Initially, I was consumed by rage and wished to damage both of them, however, that never materialized. Nevertheless, I acknowledge this might appear as a revenge story, though that was never my intention. I'm Randy Clipson, just an ordinary guy. I'm not a handsome figure, and a significant portion of my life was marked by excess weight. A shift occurred in high school due to my involvement in football, earning me the nickname Chipper. They used to say that if I chipped someone, they were going down. At 6 feet 3 inches in height and weighing 260 lbs, playing football was somewhat expected. While not excelling as an athlete, I possessed substantial upper body strength even in high school, enabling me to push defensive linemen backward. Football proved instrumental throughout my 4 school years, aiding in shedding the excess fat I had carried for most of my life. Despite retaining a bit of a belly, the accumulated muscle more than compensated. Nonetheless, having been overweight for most of my life, the self-perception as a fatty lingered. Coupled with this mindset, I was painfully shy due to constant weight-related teasing during grade and middle school. In high school, being a football player shielded me from such mockery, and it came with certain privileges, no longer making me an outcast among the girls. Despite not attracting cheerleaders, some girls were willing to go out with me. Nonetheless, I didn't engage in much dating until my senior year when I crossed paths with Cindy. Cindy Crawley transferred to our school in the latter part of my junior year, but she caught my attention only in senior year. Despite possessing the most beautiful face I had ever seen, Cindy carried at least 30 to 40 pounds of extra weight. This deterred most boys in my class, and I regret to admit that I initially shared that lack of interest. Our connection deepened when we became chemistry partners. While the subject was complicated for me, Cindy excelled and provided significant assistance. I owe her for my success in chemistry, which likely paved the way for my college journey. During our partnership, I discovered Cindy's friendly and humorous nature, along with the shared background of starting school late. Cindy had overcome a congenital heart defect, and I was held back a year by my parents, making both of us 19. Summoning all my courage, I decided to ask her out, understanding her initial suspicion given her challenging past. Despite her reluctance, she agreed to go out with me. Our first date, a simple outing to the movies followed by an ice cream soda, was enjoyable. However, my shyness prevented me from attempting to kiss her. Instead, I shook her hand and asked if I could call her, and her thrilled reaction led to several subsequent dates over the next few weeks. By the third date, I summoned the courage to give Cindy a kiss on the cheek, progressing to necking and reaching first base. The more I encountered Cindy, the more my affection for her deepened. While my developing romance was progressing, the football season took an unexpected turn. Cavern High, my high school, wasn't renowned for football prowess, but this season brought a surprising alignment of stars. Kirk Simmons, our standout quarterback, led the team with the Bailey twins, Todd and Jason, serving as our running backs. Now positioned as the left tackle, I successfully shielded Kirk's blindside, ensuring he remained unscathed. Despite losing our initial game to Mohawk High with a score of 21-7, a perennial football powerhouse, we rebounded with 7 consecutive wins, progressing to the regionals. Although we reached the state finals and suffered a 28-4 defeat from Towson High, there was a positive note, triumphing over Mohawk High in the semifinals with a satisfying 38-7 victory. My apologies for the occasional indulgence in reminiscing about the glory days of high school football. Meanwhile, my relationship with Cindy continued evolving to the next level. As prom season approached, I promptly invited Cindy to be my date. Her joyful acceptance was sealed with a big, affectionate kiss. Over the 4 weeks leading up to the prom, Cindy underwent a crash diet, shedding about 20 lbs to fit into the prom dress she had acquired. When I picked her up for the prom, my eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Despite being what most guys might consider on the heavier side, I found her stunning. Cindy always had a generous bust, but it became more pronounced in that light blue prom dress. The dress struggled to contain her chest, which threatened to spill over. The entire evening was a dream as we danced together. As the night concluded, I suggested going parking, but Cindy had different plans, directing me to a wooded area about 30 miles outside of town. Cindy explained that her uncle had a small cabin he used for hunting. The cabin was indeed small, featuring only a tiny kitchen, a couch in front of a television, a bed, and a bathroom. We started on the sofa with our usual playfulness, concluding the night on a high note. Despite our extracurricular activities, I got Cindy back home 15 minutes before her 2 a.m. curfew. Cindy and I remained close throughout the rest of high school, engaging in a physical relationship while being cautious with protection. Following graduation, I received a partial football scholarship at a Division II school 2 states away, while Cindy opted for a local community college. My major was computer science, and hers was psychology. Since I was heading off to school, we discussed what to do about our relationship. By mutual agreement, we decided to break up, feeling it wouldn't be fair to hold each other back. It was the toughest decision I had ever made. I can't even explain how awful I felt going off to school and leaving Cindy behind. She told me that if we were meant to be together, it would happen. I was terrified of losing her and hurting so badly. Upon my arrival at Mountain Ridge University, the thought of heading straight home crossed my mind, but I couldn't go back on my commitment. I had pledged to honor my commitment to the university, and my strong desire for a college education fueled my determination. The only solution I could think of was immersing myself in football practices and schoolwork from morning till night. I dedicated myself to keeping my mind occupied, despite the coach's advice against it. My coaches and teachers were impressed by my work ethic. Taking a full load of classes and being a college football player meant shedding fat and building muscle through intensive weight training, resulting in both upper and lower body strength. With only a partial scholarship, my parents covered the remaining balance, even though I knew they struggled with the cost. Playing football left me with no means to contribute financially. While I lacked funds to come home, I made a weekly call to Cindy, who appeared as devastated by our split as I was. My first college year concluded successfully, excelling in both football and academics. By the third game of the season, I earned a spot in the starting lineup, shifting to play left guard due to my slower speed. My increased strength proved beneficial, contributing to our 8-2 season record. Academically, I ended the year on the dean's list, much to my parents' delight. During the summer, Cindy and I resumed our relationship. I found myself deeply in love with her, or so I believed at the time. Reflecting on it, I've questioned whether it was love or just lust. After careful consideration, I lean towards love, as a small part of me still holds affection for her. I worked and took 3 online courses during the summer, determined to finish college as soon as possible. Cindy and I also resumed our bed activities, exploring each other's bodies whenever possible. I completed college in 3 years and married Cindy right after graduation. Both employed by the multinational software and electronics company Tri-Orbit Electronics in Virginia, we worked in software development and human resources, respectively. After saving enough money, we purchased a small house and began discussing starting a family. The first 3.5 years of our marriage were wonderful. Except for one aspect, we both gained a significant amount of weight. Cindy reached 230 lbs, and I weighed in at 310 lbs. I carried the extra weight better due to my height, but neither of us was content with the excess pounds. Despite unsuccessful attempts at dieting, my love for Cindy remained unwavering, regardless of her size. After 3 years of marriage with no kids, we consulted our family doctor. Following a series of tests, he found nothing wrong with either of us but suggested weight loss might aid Cindy's conception. So, for the first time in our lives, we embarked on a strict diet. 6 months later, Cindy was down 50 lbs, while I was only down about 25, but I must admit that I cheated more than I should have. Cindy's weight loss was noticeable, attracting attention from men. Alongside the diet, Cindy began going to the gym 5 days a week. Observing her transformation, I realized I had to step up my efforts. I strictly adhered to our diet and started hitting the gym with her. By the end of 1 year of dieting, Cindy had shed 80 lbs, and I had lost 90. While we both felt really good about ourselves, sadly, our weight loss was going to bring me a broken heart. As Cindy continued to lose weight, she started dressing in more revealing clothing. Initially enjoyable, I became displeased when I overheard some comments at work. However, I couldn't say anything because for her whole life, Cindy had been an ugly duckling. Now she had turned into a beautiful swan. The real problem for me arose when Kirk Simmons was appointed head of human resources. He was now a senior director of the company. I was just a senior programmer, and he was now 2 levels above me, becoming Cindy's boss. Initially, I didn't think much of it. Kirk was married to Susie Looper, who had been a cheerleader in high school. I had seen her at company functions, and she was still quite attractive. Hardly noticing her, I ended up dancing with her at my wife's request as she danced with her boss during a Christmas party. I danced a few times with Susie, while Kirk partnered with Cindy, dancing just beside her. I found myself becoming noticeably excited. It wasn't a big deal, though, as, still being in my 22nd, any pretty girl could elicit the same response. One surprising aspect was that she wasn't a stuck-up snob, which pleased me. Upon Kirk and I arriving, "I didn't recognize you or Cindy," Susie complimented us, expressing that we looked fabulous. My perception of Cindy's beauty had always been high, but now she was truly stunning. I mentioned, somewhat embarrassed, that someone should keep an eye on her. The response was a simple, "Thank you." I expressed gratitude for Susie's kindness, and she blushed in response. The music concluded, and around 5 months before our 4th anniversary, Cindy revealed a significant decision. She informed me of her choice to resume taking birth control pills. I raised objections, inquiring about our plans for having children. She straightforwardly mentioned that she had decided not to have any at the moment. My anger surfaced as I probed into her abrupt decision. She reassured me, stroking my arm, stating, "Look, we can have kids. I just don't want to get fat again. I want to enjoy being slim for a while." In hindsight, I should have recognized the problem at that moment, but I was clueless, having complete trust in Cindy. Unfortunately, my trust in Kirk was misplaced, as I could trust him as far as I could throw a bus. Unbeknownst to me, Kirk had put on a full-court press to get Cindy. She, of course, was flattered beyond belief that the former football captain of our high school team was pursuing her. I first became concerned when Cindy began working late and then going, supposedly, out with girlfriends. I was genuinely clueless about these things, but I'm not stupid. When Cindy started coming in later and later, I became suspicious. I didn't want to believe that she was cheating on me, but I couldn't ignore the signs. I hired a PI company, and within a week, they had all the evidence I needed. They had a video of Cindy and Kirk engaging in a lovemaking act in the office. How they obtained that, I have no idea. They had pictures of them being affectionate at dinner. Videos showed Kirk coming to my house while I was at work. Lastly, there were pictures of them engaging in a lovemaking act on our living room floor. I knew they took those through the front window of our house. Remember when I said that I couldn't really describe what it was like having closeness with Cindy the first time? Well, I have no words to explain the pain that I felt finding out that my wife was cheating on me. Not only that, but she was cheating with someone who had been a friend of mine. Granted, Kirk and I were not close, but I had still considered him a friend. It hurt unbelievably. I still held out hope that once I confronted Cindy, she would come to her senses. I was in love with her, and I thought she was still in love with me. I took the evidence home that night, and after dinner I told Cindy we needed to talk. She looked at me curiously, but sat at the kitchen table to listen. Cindy immediately turned white and then buried her face in her hands. She started to cry and ran to the bathroom. I went and knocked on the door, but she refused to open it. I waited in the kitchen with a glass of rum. Finally, she came out and sat down at the kitchen table with her head down. I spoke coldly, asking what the other person had to say. She mentioned that she didn't intend for it to happen, speaking in a voice just above a whisper. Cindy reacted, expressing disapproval and stating that there was no need for crudeness. She implied that if I had paid more attention to her, the situation might have been avoided. Initially taken aback, I briefly considered whether I had neglected her. However, my anger resurfaced, and I asserted that she shouldn't try to shift the blame. I maintained my innocence and confronted her about the affair, asking for her explanation. She looked nervously at me but remained silent. I pressed further, inquiring about our next steps. Struggling to control my anger, I questioned whether she wanted to be with Kirk or with me. Despite expressing love for me, she tearfully admitted to also loving Kirk. I conveyed that a decision needed to be made, almost biting my tongue. I set a deadline, insisting on knowing her choice by the next day. If she chose to stay with me, she would have to sever ties with Kirk, resign from her job, and commit to attending counseling. Cindy acknowledged this. Later, I retrieved all her belongings, placing them in the hall, and informed her that she could sleep in the guest room until she made up her mind. The next day, I returned home early from work. The truth was that I couldn't concentrate and was less than useless. My stomach had been doing flip-flops all day. At one point during the morning, I thought I was going to lose what little breakfast I had eaten. About 6 o'clock, Cindy came in with a very nervous look on her face. I was sitting at the kitchen table, as I had the previous night. She took a seat across from me, and I demanded to know if she had made up her mind. Tears started to flow down her cheek as she expressed her love for me, but admitted an inability to give up Kirk, stating that she loved him too. I sighed deeply, attempting to conceal the fact that my heart was breaking. Acknowledging her choice, she simply nodded, causing a pain deeper than if someone had stabbed me. My brain was about to explode. I was going back and forth at 1,000,000 miles an hour between eliminating them both and curling up in the corner and crying my eyes out. I sarcastically remarked that she had chosen quite the winner. Bringing up Kirk and Susie's new baby boy, I questioned whether it bothered her to leave the child without a father. A hint of anger and shame crossed Cindy's face as she mentioned that Kirk had planned to divorce Susie before their involvement. Continuing, I asked if she was willing to discard almost 4 years of marriage just like that. Struggling to contain both my temper and tears, I sought an understanding of her decision. To be truthful, right then, I was seriously considering smacking Cindy to a pulp and then going to look for Kirk to break his neck. She softly expressed regret for any hurt caused, her voice tender. She clarified that she hadn't intended for it to happen, but had fallen deeply in love with Kirk, and he felt the same way. Despite feeling an intense urge to damage her at that moment, I recognized the importance of maintaining control. It required all my self-control, but I eventually succeeded. Deep within the logical part of my brain, I recognized that resorting to physical violence would yield nothing. I refrained from revealing the depth of my hurt and refused to beg her to stay, considering it the worst thing a cheated-on husband could do, a sign of total weakness. I plainly stated that if the other person desired a divorce, they would have it. Confusion filled her eyes, and perhaps I imagined it, a hint of hurt. She might have expected me to fight to keep her, but I knew that if she had decided to leave, there was nothing I could do or say to stop her. Cindy was taken aback by my behavior but rose and started packing her belongings. The following day, I visited the bank and our financial advisor, explaining the situation and withdrawing half the funds from each account. I then established separate accounts in my name only, canceled all our credit cards, and applied for new ones solely in my name. I listed our house for sale through a realtor friend and finally consulted a divorce lawyer. With a heart full of hatred, I ensured Cindy was served at work, citing infidelity as the cause. The divorce proceedings were relatively straightforward. With only about 4 years of marriage and no children, there was nothing to dispute. We split everything evenly and went our separate ways. Kirk's divorce was messier. Dealing with a child under a year-old and Susie having never worked, he faced child support and alimony. One aspect of Kirk's divorce that admittedly brought me some satisfaction was his decision to cut costs on his lawyer. Instead of limiting spousal maintenance to a year or two, it was set at 15 years. Kirk wasn't pleased, but he signed the papers. 2 months after the divorces were finalized, Kirk and Cindy got married. It was a bitter pill to swallow. The initial week post-breakup left me utterly lost. Not being much of a drinker, that held no appeal. For weeks, revenge consumed my thoughts. I'm sure every guy who's been cheated on can relate. I even began searching the internet for information on how ex-husbands sought revenge on their former wives and lovers. I found myself in a dark place, even purchasing a weapon. Then, as I read story after story about guys getting revenge, a shift occurred in my perspective. Initially, my thoughts of revenge were centered on violence. Subsequently, I considered damaging their property, contemplating ideas like flattening all their tires, putting sugar in their gas tanks, flooding their new house, and various other impractical schemes. As I read more revenge stories, I recognized the absurdity in most of them, realizing no feasible way to achieve the revenge I desired. Eventually, I sought counseling at my church. The pastor spent almost 2 hours explaining that seeking revenge wouldn't alleviate the hurt from my wife's betrayal. Regardless of how much pain I inflicted on my former wife or her new husband, the emotional anguish would persist. The pastor's advice, though seemingly simple for someone with my kind of pain, emphasized that only time and distance would heal my heart. Despite my initial skepticism, I acknowledged that being near Cindy without the possibility of being with her would continually reopen the emotional wound. I also accepted the pastor's truth about revenge. It wouldn't alleviate the hurt. Consequently, I followed his counsel, necessitating the establishment of distance between Cindy and me. An opportunity arose when I heard rumors that the company was in trouble. Apparently, the firm had entered into a contract with the Defense Department. The deal promised significant profits, but there was a downside. Our firm was charged with developing an entirely new software and electronics package for the Air Force's fighters and bombers. It's entirely classified, so I can't provide details. Suffice it to say, it aimed to position the United States ahead of Russia and China, contingent on my company's successful delivery. The rumor circulating was that the project was significantly behind and over budget, making it different from typical government contracts. While substantial profits were at stake, the company faced great risk. Unlike other government projects, there would be no progress payments during the development of this software and its accompanying electronic components. Tremendous penalties loomed for late delivery, and the company could possibly go under if the project didn't meet the contract requirements. As one of the senior software designers, I was called in to consult on the impending disaster. Most other designers were hesitant to get involved, updating their resumes and considering leaving the company. Taking on the project meant risking termination and potential company collapse. The stigma of failure would linger for a long time. However, considering my modest needs post-divorce, the prospect of losing my job seemed manageable. Learning that Cindy was pregnant added emotional weight, as I had always envisioned starting a family with her. Evaluating the project data provided, it became clear that the chosen direction wouldn't work. Despite the risks, I agreed to take on the assignment and headed for California, putting about 3,000 miles between my ex-wife and me. Reminiscent of my first year in college, I delved into my work, enduring long days, sometimes spanning 20 hours, leaving little time to contemplate Cindy. I terminated 3/4 seconds of the programmers and all engineers handling electronic components, bringing in fresh talent. Despite the looming 11-month deadline, I scrapped their progress, relying on the creativity of engineers I brought on board, including some poached from rival companies. Their skepticism turned to astonishment when I explained what I wanted them to build and why I envisioned the electronic components in that particular way. Yet the challenge shifted to making the software functional. Gradually, we crafted a program that instilled confidence in me. It wasn't until 3 weeks before delivering our product to the military that I was certain of our success. The initial test merging the software and electronic components displayed a 96% success rate. Scanning the 4% that hadn't worked, I identified easy fixes. The revelation of our program's success triggered a surge in company stocks by over 300 points within a couple of months. Subsequently, the Defense Department announced the expansion of our contract to include the Navy, Army, and Marines, forecasting billions in profits. The success didn't halt there. I recognized the potential to tweak the program for various commercial applications. Essentially, we removed all classified information, creating an outstanding platform for practical uses. The array of things adaptable to this program seemed boundless. Following this triumph, I earned a promotion to Senior Vice President, tasked with developing these commercial applications. In the years that followed, frequent returns to the Virginia home office never led to encounters with Kirk or Cindy. Despite not anticipating any impact on me, I desired no contact, having nothing to convey to either of them. The pastor's counsel about putting time and distance between heartbreak had proven 100% accurate. I had moved on. During one visit, I unexpectedly met Kelly Bailey, a former cheerleader from Cavern High and Susie's best friend. Aware of her marriage to Jason Bailey and having a son before I met Cindy, I always harbored a crush on Kelly, the prettiest cheerleader. Kelly's warm demeanor in high school made her impossible not to like. Although she had aged somewhat, she remained physically attractive. In contrast to Cindy's short blonde hair and ample figure, Kelly, standing barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, had long black hair and a proportionally smaller chest. A shared warmth in their smiles was the commonality. Stunned that she recognized me in a grocery store, preparing for a board presentation, we exchanged smiles. Despite a few gray hairs and small wrinkles, I still had a slight crush. Kelly called out to me as I pondered over frozen dinners. Upon recognizing her voice, I blushed slightly. She then stopped her basket next to mine, and I greeted her with a smile, expressing my flattery at her recognition. She confessed that she wouldn't have recognized me if Susie hadn't pointed me out during lunch at Tri-Orbit. I was genuinely surprised when she mentioned that. She then smiled and confirmed that she had been working at Tri-Orbit for about 6 years, specifically in the marketing department. It surprised me to learn that Kelly worked at the same company as me. I felt a twinge of guilt for not knowing that, however, since I had little involvement with marketing, I shouldn't have felt bad. Still, I felt like I should have been aware. "How are you doing?" I eventually asked to ease my discomfort. "I'm doing as well as can be expected," she replied, a hint of sadness in her voice. "I'm divorced now. Jason has turned out to be a real idiot. Not only was he cheating with his secretary, but also with half a dozen other women. He even got one of them pregnant. I divorced him, of course. He got off pretty lightly considering what he was doing. There was no alimony because our salaries are about the same. We didn't own a house and had very little savings. All he was ordered to do was pay child support. Still, I have to hassle him for it every month. I don't mind bugging him to get the money, but he totally ignores our son, Scott. I get furious when..." "I think about it," she said. I apologized to Kelly, expressing regret over Jason's behavior. I admitted that although I was aware he had a wild side, I had hoped he would calm down after marriage. Pausing for a moment, I looked into Kelly's emerald green eyes, feeling unsure of what to say next. Eventually, I mentioned that my wife and I were divorced, with Cindy choosing to pursue. "Todd? No, Randy?" Kelly shook her head. "It was Kirk who pursued Cindy. Susie told me all about it." "I suppose I can't argue with that," I admitted, "but it takes two to tango." "You're not seriously thinking about eating any of these frozen dinners, are you?" she asked, eyeing my cart. "Yeah, I'm afraid so," I nodded. "I'm a terrible cook, and this is about all I can handle." "Look, if you'd like a home-cooked meal, why don't you come over to my house? It won't be fancy, but I guarantee it will be good." Initially, I hesitated, but the idea of a home-cooked meal proved too tempting to resist. I mentioned that I wouldn't mind having a real meal if it wasn't too much trouble. I couldn't recall the last time I had one. The evening turned out to be delightful. Kelly made meatloaf with mashed potatoes, string beans, and sherbet for dessert. It was enjoyable having someone to converse with. Scotty, as his mother called him, was a very outgoing and friendly kid. I discovered that he was a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan like me. We had a great time discussing the team and their prospects for the upcoming season. I was a die-hard fan and also a season ticket holder. In fact, I had 4 season tickets on the 50-yard line. The company covered them because I would take potential clients to the games. When I didn't have any clients, I'd invite my buddies, and if I couldn't find anyone to go with me, I'd go alone. I'd give away the other 3 tickets, usually to people trying to buy from a scalper. Scotty expressed a wish to attend a game someday, sounding wistful. In response, I impulsively offered to make it happen. Once the words left my mouth, I realized I had overstepped and swiftly attempted to rectify it. That is, of course, if your mother approves. Scotty turned to his mother with imploring eyes. All she said is, "We'll discuss it." At the end of the evening, I apologized. "I'm sorry about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offer. It slipped out before I realized. But just so you know, I have 4 season tickets to all the Bucs home games and a ton of frequent flyer miles. If you wouldn't mind him attending a game with me, I'd be thrilled to take him." She stood there with piercing eyes, and I realized that I had made another mistake. Quickly, I attempted to rectify it, but only ended up making another blunder. After a brief pause, I stuttered out that the invitation also extended to her. I suggested securing separate rooms, with one for Kelly and Scotty and another for myself. Despite feeling embarrassed, Kelly simply smiled and called me the sweetest man. While chuckling, she remarked that my expression was priceless. Feeling relieved, I sighed as I truly didn't want to offend her. I enjoyed her company and hoped we could meet up from time to time. Deciding to push ahead, I said, "Would you mind if I asked you out when I come to town? If you're with someone, I'll understand. I just really enjoyed having someone to talk to." Kelly studied me for a moment, then smiled. "Randy, I've known you since high school. I always thought you were cute and one of the nicest guys, but never considered dating you because I had Jason. Now that I've gotten to know you a little, yes, I'd be pleased if you called me, and I'd love to go see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with you and Scotty. Over the following year, I'd call Kelly every time I returned to Virginia, and we'd get together several times. I booked trips back east when I really didn't have to be there. It wasn't a love affair at first. We were just good friends who enjoyed spending time together. I took Kelly and Scotty to the final game of the season that year. The Bucs needed to win to make it into the playoffs, and they did. Scotty was beside himself with joy over the win. That night, after Scotty went to bed, Kelly came over to my room, and we became more than just good friends. When Kelly knocked on my door unexpectedly, I was engrossed in watching a local sports station analyze the Bucs game. Concerned, I asked if everything was all right, particularly about Scotty's well-being. Kelly reassured me with a smile that nothing was wrong and that Scotty was sleeping peacefully. Excited about the playoffs, she expressed a desire to have a drink and talk. Feeling a bit underdressed in my boxer shorts and t-shirt, I mentioned that I needed to put on some pants before inviting her in. However, upon searching for my trousers, I realized they weren't where I thought I had left them. Kelly said there was no need for pants as she pushed the door open and entered the room hurriedly. As I continued searching for my pants without success, Kelly giggled at the situation, causing my face to flush red with embarrassment. She then suggested putting us on an even playing field if I felt uncomfortable and proceeded to remove her skirt, leaving us both in our underwear. With a smile, she asked me to mix her a drink and join her for a conversation. I went to the mini bar, retrieving 2 small bottles of rum and 2 cans of Coke. As I mixed the drinks, Kelly climbed onto my bed and sat cross-legged, her white-laced underwear catching my attention. After handing Kelly her drink, I looked around the room for a place to sit. Sensing my hesitation, Kelly gestured toward the bed and invited me to sit beside her, reassuring me that she wouldn't bite. Despite still feeling embarrassed and red-faced, I nodded and took a seat next to her. A big swallow of my drink helped me relax as the rum coursed through my body. We talked for a while, and when we finished our drinks, I took her cup and asked if she wanted another. She shook her head, and I waited for her to get up. I figured she'd head back to her son. I was totally wrong about that. Not sure what to do, I put the cups in the wastebasket and sat down again. When I did, Kelly kissed me on the lips. It was quick and soft, sending an electrical charge through my body. She saw my surprise and smiled. "I've been waiting for months for you to kiss me. I figured that you still thought of me as that high school cheerleader who was unattainable. Let me assure you that I am not that person anymore." Kelly had read me like a book. There had been so many times that I wanted to kiss her but was afraid. I didn't want to take a chance of losing her as a friend. I leaned forward and kissed her. We kissed a long time, with our tongues exploring every part of each other's mouths. She tasted so sweet. After we parted ways, I expressed admiration, mentioning that she was a beautiful and amazing woman. Kelly then laid her head on my chest. That night of passion surpassed my first time with Cindy. 6 months after that night, Kelly and I became engaged. Scotty was thrilled that I was going to be his dad. A year after that night, we were married. Jason had been as big a turd as Kelly had claimed. He barely spoke to his son, and he really resented me. Jason was still close friends with Kirk, and every time he came to Kelly's apartment when I was there, he had to tell me how happy they were and what great closeness Kirk and Cindy were having. I guess he thought it would make me jealous. I just listened and said nothing. What I did learn was that Kirk was still heading up the human resources department for the company. But Cindy had given up her job to be a full-time mom. I was a little surprised to learn that Kirk and Cindy had 3 kids now, but it no longer bothered me at all. One time, when I heard Kelly on the phone giving Jason hell for not sending the support payment, I made the mistake of telling her to forget about it. I was more than willing to pay whatever for Scotty's needs. Kelly spoke sternly, insisting that I needed to stay out of the situation. She expressed determination not to let him off the hook for child support despite his neglect of his son. I promptly withdrew my statement, acknowledging that the money in question belonged to Scotty. In December, I was set to be appointed executive vice president of the company. The announcement was scheduled for the Christmas party at the Washington Convention Center, with around 400 to 500 attendees. I felt a bit self-conscious about the grand recognition at this event, but Kelly was overjoyed. She scolded me for complaining, insisting that I deserved the recognition. I know almost as many people in that company as you do, and they've told me story after story about how this company wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you. They also told me that you'll be the next CEO when Mel steps down next year, she said. I responded, suggesting that it may not matter. However, she countered with a smile, mentioning that she was married to the most beautiful woman in the world and had a surprise for me. We recalled a past incident in Kansas City involving a mishap with a rubber. I acknowledged the memory with a nod, which was followed by a silly grin. She confirmed that she was pregnant now, expressing her determination to keep me close. Embracing me tightly, she expressed her desire for a night in bed if we didn't have to attend the party. I confessed that I wasn't particularly fond of parties anymore, as I had to attend so many that they had lost their appeal. Kelly, however, still seemed to enjoy them, especially when I was with her. She had a certain aura that attracted people to her. We danced for a while before running into Kirk and Cindy, who were accompanied by Jason and his date, Kathy. I was genuinely surprised to see Cindy's weight gain and Kirk's protruding belly, while Jason remained in good shape. I speculated that Jason might still be actively seeking romantic encounters. I was unsure what to do, but then someone began talking over the public address system. "Could I have your attention for just a moment?" I realized it was Mel Stanton, the CEO of Tri-Orbit. I promise I won't give a long speech. As most of you know, we've been looking to replace Charlie Bruner, our executive vice president, who retired 3 months ago. I knew who I wanted right away, but the board dithered around for 3 months. Well, after months of interviewing dozens of candidates, they finally agreed with me. I'm thrilled to announce that our new executive vice president comes from within our own organization. He has always been a tremendous asset, and now it's time he receives his just reward. I give you our next executive vice president, Randy Clipson. A spotlight was suddenly shining on me, and loud applause broke out from all around the room. Kelly pulled me to her and gave me a long, passionate kiss. When the commotion ended and the party returned to normal, I turned to where Cindy, Kirk, Jason, and his date were standing. I didn't know what to say to them. Jason seemed pissed and jealousy filled Kirk's face. However, when I glanced at Cindy, there was a look of sadness and loss. Feeling uncertain about how to proceed, I watched as Kelly took charge. She greeted Kirk, Cindy, and Jason warmly, hugging each of them in turn. Then she turned her attention to Kathy, extending a polite handshake and expressing pleasure in meeting her. I took my lead from my wife. I shook Kirk, Jason, and Kathy's hands and gave Cindy a small hug. We chatted briefly and the music began playing. In a surprising twist, Kelly suggested, "Randy, why don't you dance with Cindy and I'll dance with my ex-husband? Kathy, why don't you and Kirk share a dance as well?" I looked at Kelly with a questioning expression, but she just smiled knowingly. So I danced with Cindy. I asked about Kirk and Cindy's well-being because I couldn't think of anything else to say. Cindy responded that things weren't going particularly well and mentioned that she suspected they were headed for a divorce because she believed Kirk had been unfaithful. Expressing genuine sympathy, I told her I was sorry to hear about their situation. Cindy responded skeptically, questioning whether I truly meant my apology, as she expected me to say something along the lines of, "It serves you right." I initially expressed shock at the comment, stating that I would never say such a thing. Then I realized there had been a time when I probably would have said something similar. Well, to be truthful, when we first broke up, if you'd come to me then, I probably would have said something like that. But I couldn't hate you. You were my first love, and it hurt to lose you. But life moves on, and so have I. Shortly after that, the music stopped, and tears began to stream down Cindy's face. She expressed regret, admitting that leaving me was the biggest mistake of her life and lamenting that there was nothing she could do to rectify it. As I watched her walk away, I couldn't help but feel genuine sympathy for her. Kelly put her arm around me, prompting me to lean down and kiss her. I inquired about her dance with Jason, to which she responded with a smile, saying that he was still an idiot. He actually tried to put the moves on me. He told me that he's ready to settle down, and he'd be more than happy to take me back. I just laughed at him and told him, why? Why would I want him when I had the greatest man in the world? I watched Cindy reach their table and sit down. Even from this distance, I could see the tears. Kirk and Jason appeared to be having a heated discussion. If I had to guess, I'd say that Kirk tried to put a move on Jason's date. I thought back to the pain I had felt when Cindy left me. Something like that never truly goes away. It's like a bad cut. It leaves a scar. I also thought of all the planning for revenge that filled me during that time. The pastor had been right. No amount of revenge would have ever stopped my pain. It indeed was time and distance that had healed me. As I said at the beginning, even though I had given up on the idea of getting revenge, I had, in fact, achieved it. My revenge was exacted in the only way that is truly meaningful to someone who has been cheated on. I was living well, loved, and totally happy.
Hey, Reddit. I never thought I'd be one of those people airing out their dirty laundry online, but I need to get this out. My story's not some dramatic Hollywood blockbuster or a soap opera. It's my real, fucked up life. If you've ever had your heart ripped out, then you know what I'm talking about. This is about betrayal, revenge, and maybe a little bit of stupidity on my part. But it's all true. Every word. Let me just cut to the chase. My wife cheated on me for money. Not for love, not for passion, just for cold, hard cash. She hooked up with some guy because he could give her the things I couldn't. Expensive things, luxury shit. And looking back, I feel like a complete idiot for not seeing it sooner. I mean, she played me, and I let her. But let me start at the beginning. My name doesn't really matter for now, but let's just say I'm your average guy. I work in IT. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. I've always dreamed of breaking out of the corporate grind, starting my own business. Something in tech, maybe an app, maybe some kind of IT consulting. Just making a name for myself. But dreams take money, and I didn't have a lot of that lying around. I guess that's where some of the problems started. Enter Emma, my wife. Or should I say, my ex-wife now. Emma's the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into a room. Picture this. Long, dark hair that always seemed to fall perfectly in place. A smile that could melt ice. And a body that'd make most men lose their train of thought. She knew she was beautiful, and she used it. Trust me, she fucking used it. When we met, I thought I was the luckiest guy alive. She seemed perfect, fun, smart, and yeah, she had expensive taste, but I figured, who doesn't want nice things, right? At first, it was small stuff. A designer handbag here, some overpriced shoes there. I didn't think much of it because, honestly, I thought I was the problem. Like, maybe I just wasn't making enough, and I should work harder. But as time went on, I started to notice more. She wasn't just into fashion. She was obsessed with it. She had this thing for high-end luxury brands. The kind of shit you see in celebrity Instagram feeds. She'd talk about how she deserved to have the best because, well, she looked the best. In her mind, beauty wasn't just a gift. It was a fucking currency. And I didn't realize that until it was too late. Now, don't get me wrong. I wasn't broke. We weren't struggling to put food on the table or anything like that. We had a decent apartment, we went on the occasional vacation, but I wasn't rolling in cash either. My job was steady, and I was doing well for myself, but I wasn't making the kind of money to buy $1,500 smartphones and $600 blouses every other month. And that's where the tension started. We'd argue about money, but not in the let's sit down and figure this out kind of way. It was more like she'd make these passive-aggressive comments like, it'd be nice if we could take a real vacation for once. Like, somewhere exotic. Or, oh, I saw this amazing dress today. It'd look so good on me, but I guess I'll just wait until we can afford it. It drove me insane. I was busting my ass at work, trying to save for our future. And here she was, treating life like some luxury shopping spree she was missing out on. I tried to explain to her that we needed to live within our means, but she'd just get quiet. That kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're failing, like you're not good enough. I started picking up extra work where I could. Freelance gigs, side jobs, anything to make more money. I had this idea for a tech startup that I thought could really take off, but we were stuck in this financial loop. Every time I tried to save, something came up. Usually, it was her wanting something new. It was like she had a bottomless appetite for shit we didn't need. The first real red flag? The phone. We were having dinner one night, nothing special, just some pasta and wine at our tiny kitchen table. Her phone was sitting there, right next to her plate, and I reached over for the bread or something, I don't even remember. As I stretched my hand toward the middle of the table, she quickly snatched up her phone like it was a grenade about to go off. I froze. It was such a weird reaction. You got something to hide? I asked, half joking, but I was dead serious. She gave me this look, this cold, hard look that I'd never seen before. No, she said, flat and defensive. Everyone's allowed to have their own space. You don't need to touch my stuff. That didn't sit right with me at all. We'd never had secrets between us before. At least, I didn't think we did. But that night, I realized something had shifted. Something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. From then on, her phone was like a vault. She started carrying it everywhere, even to the bathroom. And not just carrying it, clutching it, like she was afraid it'd spill her secrets the second I got near it. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband who goes through his wife's phone. But something was eating at me. One day, When she was at work, I decided to try my luck. I found her phone on the kitchen counter, and I picked it up, heart pounding in my chest like I was about to defuse a bomb. Locked. Of course, it was locked. And it wasn't just her usual passcode. No, she had changed it. I didn't know what to do with that anger. I put the phone back, trying to act like nothing had changed, but inside, I knew everything had. Then came the handbag. You know how people say the devil's in the details? Well, in this case, the devil was in a fucking handbag. She had this new purse she'd been parading around, telling me it was a really good fake that she'd gotten online. But one day, curiosity got the better of me. I was sitting alone in the apartment, staring at that bag like it was mocking me. I grabbed it and started Googling. Turns out that really good fake was an original. $3,000 retail. I couldn't believe it. I sat there on the couch, phone in hand, looking up every detail of that brand, checking serial numbers, stitching patterns, the whole deal. There was no doubt. It was real. And that's when everything started to click. The phone, the clothes, the shoes, all of it. She wasn't buying knockoffs. She wasn't getting this stuff with her paycheck either. Someone else was paying for it. I confronted her about it that night. Is this bag real? I asked her, holding it up like Exhibit A in a courtroom. She didn't miss a beat. No, of course not. It's a really good copy. You can't even tell the difference, can you? But this time, I wasn't buying her bullshit. I knew the truth. She was lying to my face, and I felt like a complete idiot for believing her all this time. But I didn't let it turn into a fight. Not yet. I wasn't ready. I needed more than just a hunch. I needed proof. And when I found it, well, things were going to get a lot worse before they got better. This was just the beginning. I didn't know how deep this rabbit hole went, but I was about to find out. So, here's where things start getting real. After that whole handbag incident, I knew I couldn't just let things slide anymore. I couldn't sit there and keep pretending everything was normal while my wife, Emma, the woman I thought I knew, was out there lying to my face. But I didn't want to confront her without knowing all the facts. I needed to catch her in the act, so to speak. One morning I got a day off, but Emma didn't know that. She was up early, dressed in one of her perfectly put-together outfits, makeup on point, ready to head to work, or so she said. That's when the idea hit me. Why not follow her? If she was lying to me, I'd catch her in the act. I figured, worst-case scenario, she'd actually be going to work and I'd be wrong. But something told me she wasn't. She kissed me goodbye like usual, grabbed her bag, and walked out the door. I waited a few minutes, just to make sure she wouldn't suspect anything, and then I followed. I kept my distance as she walked down the street, but my heart was pounding like I was in some kind of spy movie. My hands were sweating, and my mind was racing with a million thoughts. What if she really wasn't going to work? What if she was meeting someone else? What if? Then it happened. She didn't go to her job. In fact, she didn't even head in that direction. I followed her for about 10 minutes, but then I lost her. She got into a taxi, and before I could catch the plate number or follow closely enough, it sped off. I stood there, watching the taillights disappear, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I wasn't about to give up that easily, though. I decided to head to her workplace and ask around. When I got there, I saw one of the employees I'd seen a few times before. She recognized me too, probably from the occasional office party or when I'd pick Emma up. I tried to play it cool, asking if Emma was around or maybe on break. That's when the bomb dropped. "Oh, she doesn't work here anymore," the woman said casually like it was the most normal thing in the world. "What do you mean?" I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "She hasn't worked here for at least 3 months. I thought you knew." My heart nearly stopped. 3 months? Emma had been leaving for work every morning like clockwork. And for 3 months, she hadn't even had a job? I felt like I'd just been sucker punched. I thanked the woman and left the office, my mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. The anger bubbling inside me was white hot. I wanted to go home, wait for her, and tear her a new one. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust. She'd been lying to me every single day. On the way home, I couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. I called my best friend, Matt, and told him everything. I was pissed, and I wasn't thinking clearly. "I'm done with this, Matt. I said, gripping the steering wheel. I'm going to confront her tonight. She has no idea what's coming. But Matt, being the level-headed guy he is, talked me down. Dude, don't do anything rash, he said. You realize your marriage is hanging by a thread, right? If you go in guns blazing, you might never find out the whole truth. What if there's more going on than you think? He had a point, as much as I hated to admit it. If I blew up now, I might never find out who she was really seeing or why she was lying. And honestly, I wasn't ready to throw in the towel without getting the full story. I need your help, I told him. I need to figure out what's going on. Matt agreed, and we made a plan. The next day, I pretend to go to work like usual, but instead, Matt and I would tail her together. He had a better car for this kind of thing anyway. Tinted windows, smooth ride, no one would suspect a thing. So that's what we did. I got up, dressed for work, kissed Emma goodbye like nothing was wrong, and walked out the door. But instead of heading to my office, I met Matt at the corner, hopped into his car, and we followed her. She took a taxi again, and this time we kept up. She didn't head to some cheap motel or a friend's place. Nope. The taxi took her to one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. We're talking gated communities, million-dollar houses, the kind of place where people don't just have a nice car. They have several. Emma got out of the taxi, glanced around like she was making sure no one was watching, and walked up to one of those fancy houses. Here's the kicker. She didn't knock or ring the doorbell. She pulled out a key and unlocked the door like she owned the place. Matt and I stayed parked on the street, watching. The house was huge, and it had the kind of driveway that screamed money. We sat there all day, waiting, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The sun was setting when the door finally opened again, and Emma stepped out. This time, she wasn't alone. A man followed her. Tall, well-dressed, probably in his mid-40s, and everything about him screamed wealthy. He had his arm around her like they were a couple, like they were used to each other's touch. That's when Matt pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the guy. Let's see who this asshole is, Matt muttered as we started Googling the guy's face. It didn't take long. Turns out, the man walking arm in arm with my wife was some big-time businessman. A real estate mogul, if you can believe it. He was all over the internet. Articles, interviews, charity galas, the works. And the icing on the cake? We found his Instagram profile. There were plenty of pictures of him, all right? But none of them were with Emma. Nope. His Instagram was full of photos with a completely different woman. His wife. I felt like I was going to be sick. There it was, right in front of me. The proof I'd been dreading. My wife, the woman I'd been living with, sleeping next to, planning a future with, had been living a double life. And this guy? He wasn't just some random fling. He was married too. Matt and I sat there in silence, the weight of everything sinking in. We knew we couldn't act yet. Not without more. I had to go home, pretend like everything was fine, like I hadn't just watched my wife walk out of another man's house. I couldn't blow up. Not yet. I told Matt we'd deal with it tomorrow. We'd have to. But tonight, I had to keep my cool. I had to go home and play dumb like I was none the wiser. So that's what I did. I went home, walked through the door, and kissed her like nothing had changed. But deep down, I knew everything had. After the shock of what I had seen the previous day, I couldn't let it go. The image of Emma walking out of that house with another man, all smiles, haunted me. My brain was working overtime. I knew I had to do something, but what? Blowing up at Emma didn't seem like the right move. Not yet. I needed more information. That's when I got an idea. The businessman. I couldn't stop thinking about him. His face, his profile, his life on display for the world to see, but with a wife who wasn't Emma. I went back to his Instagram page and started scrolling through his photos again. Pictures of his life of luxury, trips to exotic locations, fine dining, but always with his actual wife by his side. She was beautiful too, not in the flashy, materialistic way Emma was, but in a more understated, elegant way. It didn't take long to find her. She was in several of his photos and her account was tagged. I clicked on her profile. It was private, but that didn't matter. I wasn't interested in snooping through her posts. I had a more direct approach in mind. I sat there for a few minutes, wondering how to phrase the message. I knew this wasn't going to be easy for her, and I didn't want to come off like a complete psycho. So I kept it simple. Hi, I'm reaching out because I have some important information about your husband. I'd rather not say too much over a message. Can we meet? I think it's something you'd want to know, and we can do it in a public place, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I hit send and waited, unsure if she'd even respond. But she did. It didn't take long. Within an hour, she replied, agreeing to meet the next day at a busy cafe downtown. The next day, I arrived early, nerves buzzing through me. I wasn't sure what to expect from this meeting. Would she be angry? Would she not believe me? But when she walked in, she was calm, composed. She had that same quiet grace about her that I'd seen in her photos. We sat down, exchanged some polite small talk, and then I told her everything. I didn't hold anything back. How I had followed Emma, the house, the photos, the fact that her husband was cheating on her with my wife. She listened, not showing much emotion at first. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, I need to check this out for myself. Give me your number, and I'll be in touch. She didn't seem surprised or devastated. It was like she had been expecting this, or at least wasn't shocked that her husband could be capable of it. She stood up, thanked me for telling her, and left, leaving me sitting there wondering if I had done the right thing. A week passed. It was the hardest week of my life. I had to act like nothing was wrong at home, like I was still the clueless husband, while in reality, I knew everything. Emma was still going to work every day, but now I knew exactly where she was going. Each time she kissed me goodbye, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Then a week later, I got the call. It was her. Can you come to my house? She asked. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, and I knew something was up. I agreed, and later that day, I found myself pulling up to her place. A huge, elegant home, far nicer than the apartment Emma and I shared. She greeted me at the door, and as I stepped inside, she led me to the living room. There was a bottle of wine on the table, 2 glasses, but I could tell this wasn't just a casual conversation. I hired a detective, she said, getting straight to the point. He confirmed what you told me. My husband has been renting that house for months, meeting your wife there. And he's been buying her expensive things, jewelry, clothes, phones. The whole lot. She poured herself a glass of wine, took a long sip, and looked me in the eye. I'm going to ruin him, she said, her voice cold and matter-of-fact. He thinks he can get away with this, but he has no idea who he's dealing with. I could feel the weight of her words. This wasn't a woman who was going to sit back and let her husband walk all over her. She had a plan, and it wasn't going to end well for him. She finished her wine and refilled the glass. Then she turned to me, sizing me up for a moment. Do you want some wine? She asked, and I nodded. I wasn't about to refuse. I needed something to take the edge off, and maybe we both did. We talked for a while after that. She told me about her life, how her father had started the business her husband now ran. Her father was wealthy and powerful, the kind of man whose name opened doors and closed others. She didn't mention his name outright, and I got the feeling it was better that way. This was a woman who had been born into power and privilege, and she knew how to use it. We had a few drinks, and the conversation flowed more easily after that. She was smart, sharp, and honestly a little intimidating. But then, without any pretense or build-up, she asked me something I wasn't expecting. Do you want to have sex? It wasn't flirtatious or seductive. It was just a question, plain and simple. I stared at her for a moment, caught off guard, but then I realized I didn't need to think too hard about my answer. Yes, I said. The next hour or so was a blur of heat and intensity. She was an experienced woman. There was no doubt about that. She knew exactly what she wanted, and she took it. There wasn't any guilt or shame, no hesitation. It felt almost transactional in a way, but I didn't care. I was too caught up in the moment, in the escape from everything that had been crushing me. When it was over, I left her house, feeling strangely satisfied. Not just from the sex, but from the fact that for once I felt like I had control over something in this mess. She wasn't just some scorned wife. She was a woman on a mission, and I was a part of that now, whether I liked it or not. When I got home that night, after everything that had happened with the businessman's wife, I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew it was time to confront Emma. I didn't care about playing it cool, not after everything I'd seen, not after what she'd done. I slammed the door shut behind me, and the sound must have startled her because she turned to look at me with this wide-eyed expression, like she knew what was coming. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low but shaking with anger. She barely looked up from her phone, still scrolling, still acting like nothing was wrong. But I wasn't having it. I walked straight up to her and threw it all out there. "I know everything," I said, my voice rising. "I know about the businessman, about the house, about the lies. You think I'm that stupid? You're a fucking fool if you think I wouldn't find out." That got her attention. She dropped her phone and stood up, her face twisting into something between anger and disgust. But she didn't even try to deny it. "So what?" she snapped. "I don't need you. I haven't needed you for a long time. You're just some placeholder. He's the one who's providing for me now. He loves me. He's going to leave his wife, and we're going to be together." The audacity of it all hit me like a freight train. She was standing there, telling me, proudly telling me, that she had been waiting for him to dump his wife for her. It was pathetic. "You really think he's going to leave his wife for you?" I asked, laughing bitterly. "You're delusional." She glared at me, arms crossed, like she couldn't believe I wasn't bowing down to her fantasy. "He will," she insisted. "You'll see. I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice dead serious. "You can go live in your little dream world, but I'm done with this. We're done." She scoffed. "Good. You should have done that a long time ago." And just like that, she grabbed her bag, threw a few things into it, and walked out the door without another word. No apologies, no remorse, just cold indifference. But she had no idea what was about to hit her in a few days. A few days later, everything fell apart for her and her beloved businessman. His wife, no, that woman, the one with the quiet power, wasn't just sitting around after our conversation. She was planning her revenge. With the help of her father, she dismantled her husband's business, leaving him without a thread to his name. I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine, but I didn't care enough to dig into the details. All I knew was that Emma's little fantasy life crumbled just as quickly as it had started. As for me, I filed for divorce, and the process moved faster than I expected. Emma didn't fight it. Why would she? She had already moved on, or so she thought. Then, out of the blue, I got another call from the businessman's wife. She invited me to visit her again. I didn't know what to expect, but I went. When I arrived, she poured me a glass of wine, and we sat in her living room. "So," she said, looking at me with a calm, calculating expression, "what do you want in exchange for all this information?" At first, I told her I didn't want anything. I was just glad to see the truth come to light. But then I thought about it. I had been stuck in a dead-end job for so long, and I did have an idea that I'd been sitting on for a while. "There is one thing," I said. "I have a startup idea. It's still rough, but it has potential." She listened carefully, but when I finished explaining, she shook her head. "No," she said flatly. "Not like this. Come back tomorrow with a solid plan." I didn't waste any time. I spent the entire night working on my idea, refining it, turning it into something real. The next day, when I went back to her house, she wasn't alone. There was another man with her, a business analyst. He listened to my pitch, asked a few questions, and then he turned to her and whispered something. She nodded slowly, then turned to me. "All right," she said, "I'll invest, but I want 35% of the business if it becomes profitable." I was stunned. I knew she was powerful, but I didn't think she'd actually take me seriously. This was more than I had ever hoped for. I agreed to her terms without hesitation. And now, here I am, writing this while putting together a team to get my startup off the ground. I can't go into details yet, but I know it's going to be profitable. I can feel it. Funny how things turn out, huh? What started as the worst period of my life is turning into something that could change everything for me. Thank you, Reddit, for letting me get this all out. Sometimes life takes you down a road you never expected, But maybe that's the point. You don't always know what's waiting on the other side. Update, it's been about a year since everything went down, and looking back, it feels like a lifetime ago. I'm sitting here in my office. Yeah, my office, writing this update, and I can't help but feel a mix of pride and disbelief at how much my life has changed. Things are good, really good, and I owe a lot of that to the lessons I learned during the darkest time of my life. Let me start with the business. The startup I mentioned? It took off faster than I ever expected. The woman who invested in me, the businessman's ex-wife, kept her word. She gave me the capital I needed, and I built a team that believed in the vision I had. It wasn't easy. Those first few months were brutal. Late nights, endless meetings, tweaking the product until it was perfect, but it all paid off. The business now is thriving. We've got a steady stream of clients, and we're growing at a rate I didn't think possible when I was just dreaming about this idea. And before you ask, my relationship with her, the investor, it's strictly business. She's a sharp woman, no nonsense, and she keeps everything professional. We meet regularly, but it's always about the company. There are no hidden agendas, no awkward moments, nothing like what happened between us that first time. We both moved on, and it works. Now let's talk about the fun part, my ex-wife Emma. Yeah, she came crawling back. I didn't think she would, not after how things ended between us. But once news started spreading about my business doing well, she suddenly remembered I existed. It started with a message. Simple at first, just a hey, how have you been? Like she hadn't blown up our life and walked out the door for some other guy. I didn't respond. Then the messages started piling up. Longer, more desperate. She started hinting at how much she missed me, how she made a mistake, how she didn't realize what she had until it was gone. Classic, right? The cherry on top was when she called me one evening, trying to sound sweet and remorseful. She said all the things you'd expect. I still care about you. We had something special. Maybe we could start over. But the truth is, she didn't give a damn about me. She just saw the money, the success, and thought she could slither back into my life like nothing had happened. I let her talk for a bit, then I just told her to go to hell. Flat out. I don't know if she expected me to say that, but the silence on the other end of the line told me all I needed to know. I hung up and never looked back. Let her live in the mess she created. But enough about her. There's someone new in my life now. I met this girl a few months ago. Let's call her Sarah. She's different. No drama, no baggage, no hidden motives. We met in the most random way at a friend's party, and we just clicked. She's funny, smart, down-to-earth, and she doesn't give a damn about the material stuff. She doesn't know about my business yet, at least not the details. I've been keeping that part of my life under wraps, not because I don't trust her, but because I want to make sure she's with me for me, not for the money or the success. We've been spending a lot of time together, and yeah, I'm really starting to like her. It's nice, actually, being with someone who doesn't expect anything from me except for honesty and just being myself. It's refreshing after everything I've been through. I'm not in any rush to tell her about the business. Maybe one day, when it feels right. But for now, I'm enjoying just getting to know her without any of the complications. So, that's where I'm at now. A year ago, I was stuck in the middle of the worst period of my life, with everything falling apart around me. And now I'm running a successful business, surrounded by people who believe in what we're building. I've got my life back, and I've got something more, hope for the future. I want to end this by thanking everyone who's been reading this, who's been following my story. Sometimes life throws you into situations that seem impossible to survive, but trust me, if I can get through it, so can you. Believe in yourself, in your ability to come out stronger, and never let anyone take away your worth. Success isn't just about money or power. It's about learning from the pain, moving forward, and becoming the best version of yourself. I learned that the hard way, but I'm grateful for the lessons, as brutal as they were. To anyone reading this, whether you're in the middle of your own mess or just trying to figure things out, keep going. Believe in the best, and don't let anyone tell you that you don't deserve it. Thank you, Reddit, for being there through it all.
Let's start with D-Day in the spring of 2017, when my wife and I were around 30 years old and had been together since our college days. We also had a child in elementary school. Initially, I suspected my wife of having an affair, but when I expressed my concerns, she immediately denied it. Over time, my fears were confirmed, and I confronted her with evidence. Despite her persistent denial, she eventually confessed, crying and asking for forgiveness. At that point, I felt like demanding her immediate departure and starting the divorce process. It's crucial to share how the events leading to the revelation of her infidelity unfolded. Even though it didn't involve physical closeness, plans for an unfaithful meeting were already in place. A few months before that crucial day, I noticed my wife using her phone more cautiously. She would turn away when using it and quickly put it away when I entered the room. She even took it to the bath or shower, which seemed strange, but I didn't think much of it at first. One incident caught my attention. We used to freely share our phones, but the day I wanted her number to find a new restaurant, something seemed off. I suggested going to a new restaurant, but my phone was charging. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked for her phone number. When she asked why, I explained, but she held onto her phone while showing me the menu. This, along with other behaviors, raised my suspicions. After pondering for days, I finally asked her directly if something was going on with someone else. She reassured me, citing a friend's personal issue and the need for privacy. Despite her reassurances, an uneasy feeling persisted. Despite my efforts, the discomfort lingered, suggesting more to the situation. The suspicious behavior appeared to stop, or so I thought. Then a significant incident occurred, further confirming my suspicions. Approaching this delicately, one afternoon during an unfaithful moment, she reached for her phone, expressing a desire to record the process on video. This was unusual as she usually felt insecure around cameras. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked about the purpose. A little embarrassed, she said she wanted to observe herself. Seeing this new adventurous side, I agreed. She set up a camera, filming herself on a selfie camera, capturing every detail of her intense engagement. I was pleasantly surprised by her active participation, as she usually did this only at my request. But this time she readily agreed without taking her eyes off the camera, radiating captivating enthusiasm. The handsome sounds she made added to the intensity of the situation and captivated me. When the performance reached its peak, she went further, showcasing the achievement in front of the camera. I regret acknowledging the future importance of this video, but it's definitely significant. Despite the clear deviation from our usual behavior, I chose not to make a big deal out of it, not wanting to embarrass or discourage her from trying new things. Instead, I tried to keep things normal, secretly hoping we could explore this new experience together. Since my wife and I have been in a committed relationship since age 20, her sudden change in character triggered a familiar, instinctive feeling in me. A few weeks after the video incident, I decided to check her phone for suspicious messages or photos, but found nothing unusual. Later, I remembered we used the backup function together, saving pictures automatically to Google Photos. Realizing this, I logged into my laptop using her credentials for further investigation. When checking her email, everything seemed normal until I found a large collection of candid photos and videos taken by her about 4 months ago. They weren't meant for me, and she had deleted them from her phone, but forgot to delete them from the backup. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to continue searching by opening the video camera on her phone and scrolling through the discovered content before talking to her. I chose to rewrite this material in case she remembers and erases it. I kept this information for several days, trying to handle it with understanding and considering possible explanations for its presence. At that time, OnlyFans wasn't popular, so I initially thought she might post explicit materials online, but that would be out of character for her. I emphasized that she's always been reserved. I couldn't imagine how this could be explained other than a romantic relationship with someone else. Again, I expressed my suspicions to her, mentioning something was off, but refrained from revealing the facts I discovered, hoping for an explanation that would dispel my doubts. In response, she seemed slightly offended, reminding us that we already discussed this issue and denying any relationship with another man. There was no admission of guilt. I asked her again if she needed to share something or speak out, and again she refused. Before this conversation, I got access to her Google account again, so I presented her with all the information I gathered and demanded an explanation about the contents of her Google account. Her initial reaction was surprised, but she quickly composed herself. She accused me of ruining an unexpected anniversary gift she had planned for me. Knowing that we both travel a lot, she wanted to give me something interesting for our time apart, but I remained skeptical and decided to play a bluff. I told her I had access not only to her Google account, hoping this would make her confess the truth on my ultimatum to leave if she didn't. She couldn't hold back her tears and insisted everything was not as it seemed. Apologizing, she asked for forgiveness. She claimed she did nothing wrong, but only acted stupidly. When I asked about the person she mentioned, she called him her colleague. They first met at a work event at the end of 2016, about 7 months before this important event. Interestingly, he holds a similar position in another branch of the same company, located about 200 miles away from us. Initially, they communicated by email, mainly about work. After exchanging numbers, she emphasized that, given his extensive experience in this position, her only intention was to get professional advice and share tips. It was her recent promotion to a similar position that triggered more personal topics in their conversation, and he began to flirt, to which she willingly reciprocated. Realizing the need for privacy, he suggested moving their communication to an encrypted messaging app. From my perspective, this man seemed to have a tendency to pursue married women, which was unpleasant to me. The initial messages were deleted, so I never saw them, but the rest of their conversation was saved in the messaging app they used. When I said I wanted to watch, she resisted and tried to talk me out of it emotionally. At the same time, I reminded her that I was ready to leave if she wasn't completely honest with me. Eventually, she reluctantly opened the app and handed it to me, curling up with her head in her lap. The content of the messages was explicit, filled with provocative photos and videos. Both participants were excited about an upcoming summer work event where they planned to spend 2 nights in a hotel, detailing shockingly graphic messages about what they intended to do. Continuing to read, my thoughts went back to the earlier video. I asked if she had sent him the video, and in response, she burst into tears. Trying to gather more information, I scrolled through the conversation until I found a video. To my horror, they were exchanging numerous notes discussing him. He expressed pleasure from indulging in pleasure while watching the video, and she replied that it turns her on. This revelation deeply offended me. It wasn't just about sharing a faithful video, but also emotional betrayal. Participating in such a vulnerable action was completely unfamiliar to me. Let me clarify that I've never shared explicit photos, let alone sent them. The idea of sharing such an unfaithful picture, especially with someone she was involved with, terrified me. However, they managed to involve me in their past relationships, even though I never willingly participated. Maybe not intentionally, but it seemed so. Now, thinking about it, I realize with deep regret that I was just her replacement and an equal participant in that video. I realized that all those worries and experiences I expected were directed solely for his benefit, not mine. So I made the difficult decision to leave and informed her about my desire to divorce. Despite her moving out, she insisted on reconciling. To get a grip on the situation, I consulted with several divorce lawyers who informed me that a settlement agreement would inevitably lead to a significant decrease in my financial well-being and joint custody of our child. After carefully studying my financial capabilities and having numerous conversations with my parents, I came to this conclusion. Turning to my colleague for advice and trusting my friends, I concluded that divorce is the most appropriate option. I believed that I could overcome financial difficulties reasonably soon, allowing me to retire as planned. Additionally, I believed that my daughter's well-being would be better if she had contented parents, even if they were no longer married. When I finally reached out to my wife to tell her about my decision to start divorce proceedings, she surprised me by offering a deal. She suggested a year-long trial separation, during which we would have time to cool down and restore the relationship. After seeking advice from a marriage counselor, I reconsidered the situation. If I chose to move on, the consultant would be ready to facilitate the divorce process, providing equal custody of the child and a more favorable distribution of property. After careful consideration, I agreed to this decision. I made it clear to my wife that I intended to approach our separation as if I were single. Given the length of our relationship and my limited experience when we first started dating, I felt that I needed to gain more life experience to make an informed decision about our future. I expressed my dissatisfaction with her behavior and made it clear that if she considered it unfair or felt uncomfortable in such an unequal position, then we could think about divorce. Although it was unpleasant for her, she understood my point of view and eventually agreed. Soon after, I started dating other women, including a romantic relationship with a woman I met at the gym that lasted several months. It seems that my wife doubted the sincerity of our relationship. She didn't handle the situation properly. During our first marriage consultation, we introduced ourselves and discussed our circumstances. The marriage counselor asked about my dating status, to which I replied affirmatively. In response, my wife made the following remark: "I don't see the point in us going through this if you're dating other women." After the session, I agreed with her opinion and expressed the belief that marriage counseling might not be a useful idea. She subsequently apologized and retracted her words. I told her we could revisit the idea later. Over the next few months, she periodically, often late at night, sent me messages asking why I had treated her this way and whether I had not punished her properly. After about a year and a half, I began to consider the possibility of reconciliation. We successfully engaged in co-parenting and spent time with our daughter as one family. Besides, the dates were incredibly dull. Perhaps it was premature, but disappointment overwhelmed me. After numerous dates and even second and third dates, I realized that I couldn't imagine anything more than casual relationships with the women I dated. As a result, having been divorced for more than a year, I decided to end my dating. This choice allowed me to spend more time reconnecting with my wife. In early 2019, I asked her to move in with us to rebuild our family, bringing great joy to my daughter. Our relationship restoration centered around our shared commitment to raising our child. As a mother, I trust her implicitly. She's excellent, and I have full confidence in her ability to make sensible financial and medical decisions on my behalf if needed. However, our romantic love hasn't rekindled, and unfortunately, I no longer feel a deep sense of gratitude for having her in my life. While some aspects of our relationship aren't ideal, it doesn't diminish my overall happiness. I've held on to hope for a long time, but it's been over 4 years since our reconciliation, and it seems things won't get much better. Nevertheless, I'm content fulfilling the roles of a responsible partner and devoted father daily. This used to suit me well, but recent events brought discord into our relationship, leaving me feeling depressed and lost after the betrayal. I'm really counting on the support of others. My best friend and I have been inseparable since our teenage years, attending all significant events together, from proms to weddings and even the birth of our children. Despite the busy life, we managed to find time for joint sports several times a week. During the tough times of separation from my wife, he provided support, checking on me daily and ensuring I took care of myself. He even monitored my drinks intake. I tried not to succumb to excessive drinking and to keep my composure until I regained stability in my life. But after I took over the organization of Thanksgiving last year, the situation began to change. He became distant, often canceled our classes at the gym, and generally avoided communication. At first, I attributed this behavior to being busy during the holiday season, given the family and work responsibilities that usually consume all of us at this time. From time to time, I contacted him by SMS to find out how he was doing, but his answers usually came down to short messages or a simple thumbs-up emoji. I didn't attach much importance to this. Perhaps he just needed personal space. I tried to communicate with him and convince him of my sincere care and support. But in January, my wife confronted me with the fact that I had not informed her about the divorce of my closest friend and his wife. I was completely unaware of the situation she was talking about. As it turned out, my friend's wife turned to my wife with a request to help her overcome infidelity and convince her of the need to work on their marriage. In response, my wife just offered her typical advice. She stressed the importance of qualities such as transparency, patience, and respect, and even advised me to read something. But I was struck by his reaction to someone else's situation. Despite the obvious irony in her answer, I refrained from expressing my thoughts. It was very sad for me to watch the pain they caused. Like everyone else, I knew about the difficulties they faced and could not understand why they did not turn to me for support. After all, this man gave me incredible support during my wife's infidelity, and I thought he should have known that I would never condemn him. Driven by my anxiety, I started reaching out to him, inviting him to the gym or for a drink, hoping to find solace. We were engaged, for example, in a game of disc golf, but it took a long time to persuade him. When we met, his attitude towards me was far from warm. He seemed terse and unfriendly, but as we talked, he gradually began to tell his story. He said that at some point, his wife told him that they should live separately, as I did. She even suggested that extramarital affairs are common in many marriages. His wife's disbelief in his fidelity led to the fact that he began to think about divorce. It was obvious that he partially blamed me for the current situation. The pain inflicted on me was as sharp as a blade. The mere thought that I had played some role, even the most insignificant, in the cruel fate of my friend's betrayal, caused almost as much pain as the discovery of my wife's infidelity. Did my decision to stay with my wife somehow affect this outcome? Does forgiving infidelity mean that it becomes more tolerable? Is there anything I can do to help my friend? I tried to explain why I decided to stay, emphasizing that our relationship had become purely practical. Our marriage no longer resembled what it was before. However, his indifference didn't confuse me. I believe he has every right to be angry, and I sympathize with him. The recent incident reopened old emotional wounds, significantly worsening my relationship with my wife. It's been 2 months since our last faithful moment, and even making eye contact or engaging in physical touch has become challenging for me. The thought of divorce has started crossing my mind again, but fortunately, my daughter is grown up now and can handle the potential consequences. I think she's reached an age where she can express her wishes and opinions about our family situation. I have complete confidence in my wife's ability to be a great co-parent, irrespective of our relationship status. I feel a strong sense of guilt and depression about how much we've regressed, and I'm somewhat disgusted by my own actions. Have any of you ever felt this overwhelming sense of guilt, especially at such an advanced stage? How did you cope with it? Logically, I understand I'm not to blame, but his criticism puts a lot of pressure on my conscience. I can't support him the way he once supported me. I'm genuinely at a loss about what to do. Any advice or words of support would be greatly appreciated. I can't help but wonder if cheating has permanently damaged the part of me seeking connection and closeness. After our conversation, I felt emptiness and the absence of any real essence. I remember lying in bed one weekend, contemplating the lack of emotions I should be feeling. Despite being with an amazing woman, experiencing a tender and charming moment, an inexplicable emptiness prevailed within me. I longed for the deep connection and closeness my wife and I once had, but it never surfaced. This inability to feel burdened me with guilt and deep self-doubt. When my wife and I reconciled, I hoped to regain the deep satisfaction and connection we once shared. Despite the physical aspect being enjoyable, there's no true satisfaction in it. It feels like I'm just going through the motions and not experiencing a genuine connection with my wife. Since I last expressed my concerns, there has been some improvement in our relationship. We've had several conversations, and I must commend my wife for her insight and intelligence in understanding what was bothering me. I questioned why she felt entitled to condemn my friend's wife for behaving similarly to herself. She adamantly denied the similarity, claiming Mike's wife had repeatedly cheated while she had never done so. It was clear she had convinced herself she never intended to cheat with a third person. I reminded her of our previous conversations, to which she replied something like this: "I made a big mistake and allowed myself to get carried away by the moment, even though I had no intention of doing anything. She just doesn't get it, or maybe I don't understand it. On one hand, I recognize our situation could have been worse, but on the other, the guilt still weighs on me. At least we're communicating now. Some people suggested psychotherapy, but we never went to marriage counseling after the first session. However, my wife attended individual therapy sessions during our separation. My family has faced challenges with mental health treatment, and my grandmother's mistreatment by mental health professionals during a less understanding era left a lasting impact on our perception. This has become a significant obstacle for me in seeking help for myself, and I'm unsure how to overcome it. Regarding Mike, I decided to give him the space, as you all recommended. I reached out to him through text, expressing my support, apologizing for his current difficulties, and assuring him of my presence and support. In response, he gave me a thumbs up, indicating he needed my help. I can't help but feel sorry for him and would like to offer support. I'm grateful to all of you for being an umbrella for me, because I can't share these things with anyone in my life. They either condemn me or condemn my wife, which isn't good for anyone. I would greatly appreciate any advice or words of support. On another note, tonight was an unexpected development. For the first time since the new year and the incident with Mike and his wife, after finishing work, she drank several glasses of wine. From the start, she exuded undeniable beauty that has always captivated me. Lately, my desire for physical release has been increasing rapidly. Complicating matters, her infidelity revealed that I'm not an integral part of her past life. Perhaps I'm just a preference, not an absolute necessity, meaning if I can't satisfy her desires, someone else undoubtedly will. There was no tenderness or closeness in this meeting, just dark, desperate, and even primal energy. As soon as she reached the end, the immediate desire was to take a shower, which I did. Unfortunately, her feelings were hurt, and they would have been hurt even more if I had rejected her. I'm not sure this outcome can be considered a victory for me. I apologize for clouding the mood, but I am deeply disappointed in myself and our situation now. Sharing my thoughts here brings me some comfort. Growing up, my father instilled in me that a man should silently cope with his problems and fulfill his duties, as no one cares about our emotional well-being. We are valued only for our usefulness. Perhaps it's not surprising he passed away at such a young age. After the incident I described, an awkward tension lingered in our family. To avoid this discomfort, I intentionally kept my presence to a minimum, thanks to my daily routine, including work and gym classes. Additionally, my daughter and I found solace in our shared passion for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, spending a significant amount of time together in the gym, where events were held every evening on weekdays and Sunday afternoons. In early February, news of my mother's sister's pass away reached us. She lived in a neighboring state and left behind cherished family photos, looms, and personal belongings important to my mother. Without hesitation, I offered to make the trip to pick up these valuable items. The agreement was made about 3 weeks ago, and my wayward wife and I were planning to make the trip together last weekend. On Friday, as we were getting ready for work, I reminded her of our plans for the Sunday trip and volunteered to go alone, despite the long journey of over 4 hours each way. Even though I assured her I could handle it, I brought up my past experience with such a trip. She expressed a desire to go, but I convinced her everything was fine and suggested she probably had more interesting ways to spend Sunday. Yet, she insisted on accompanying me and said she didn't mind coming along. I stressed that I wanted her to join me, but emphasized it was ultimately her decision whether to stay home or join the trip. In response, I made it clear I wanted her to come with me. I didn't want her to go, not because I didn't want her to, but because I understood it would be an unpleasant experience for her. So, on Sunday morning, I woke up early, ensuring my mother could take care of our daughter for the whole day. Once everything was settled, I returned home for my wife, ready to hit the road. The first hour of the ride passed in silence, as she had just woken up and doesn't like to talk in the morning. Eventually, we stopped for breakfast, refreshed ourselves with some coffee, and began a conversation mostly about our daughter and work. Then, the conversation took an unexpected turn. It was casual, consisting of small talk, and nothing extraordinary. Suddenly, she inquired about Mike's well-being. Not being aware of his current situation, I admitted my ignorance, which puzzled her, given our close friendship. I explained that I hadn't met with him since our last get-together for drinks a few months ago. Perplexed, she asked if there was any specific incident causing our separation. I clarified that it was simply both of us being busy with our lives, making communication difficult. Despite my efforts to shift the conversation, she refused to back down. She started criticizing me, stating that I didn't support a friend and expressing disappointment about my absence during his tough times. She insisted that his difficulties stemmed from his wife's infidelity and the upcoming divorce. Though I sensed tension rising, I managed to contain it. Instead, I calmly told her I no longer wanted to continue the conversation and drowned out her words by playing my music podcast. Deep down, I knew this conversation was unavoidable and had to happen. I've always been better at expressing my thoughts in writing than speaking off the cuff. To prepare for this conversation, I actively participated in online discussions, which proved helpful. Additionally, I maintain a diary where I jot down questions I need answers to and articulate my thoughts for the audience. Despite my stubbornness, the invaluable advice I've received from everyone here has genuinely influenced me. Without hesitation, I decided to lower the stereo system's volume. I shared my meeting with Mike, explaining that his wife, like me, encouraged him to live separately. I emphasized that infidelity unfortunately became common in marriage, leading him to think his reaction was exaggerated. I conveyed that there was some truth in his wife's viewpoint, suggesting that staying with a cheater unwittingly normalizes betrayal. Furthermore, I opined that it would be crucial for his wife to witness the consequences my wife faced after losing her marriage. Perhaps she wouldn't have taken the action she did. I also mentioned that Mike's divorce and our conversation brought back painful memories, making me reflect on her infidelity and our marriage. She reacted with anger and defensiveness, criticizing Mike and objecting again to me calling her relationship with a colleague treason. Trying to avoid a difficult discussion, I advised her to disregard this issue, expressing regret for bringing it up and suggesting we focus on the beauty of trees and flowers. In response, I turned on the radio again, and we endured about 30 minutes of awkward silence. Eventually, she seemed to calm down, apologized, and expressed a desire to talk. Reluctantly, I agreed, allowing her to continue the conversation. Her first question was whether I still loved her, and I honestly admitted that I was not sure. She claimed to know about my feelings for her. Curious, I asked how she could be sure when I couldn't figure it out myself. She said that love is an action, not just a feeling. She feels my love because I am devoted to our family. I am a devoted father, faithfully fulfilling my duties every day, even receiving her during our separation. Even in the toughest times, she trusted me infinitely. When she needed me, she knew she could rely on me without hesitation. Being next to me, she felt confident for herself and our daughter. She believed that all my actions stemmed from love, and if she felt I loved her, she considered it genuine affection. She asked if I believed she loved me, and I confidently replied that I knew what she loved. I admitted that her life would probably be easier if she decided to leave, and love would be the driving force behind her decision. I wondered why she chose to stay despite putting our family at risk during the betrayal. I couldn't understand how she could claim to love me and still behave that way. I expressed my doubts, suggesting that something might be lacking in me, making her seek connections with another person. I was puzzled why she never raised these issues with me, stressing that she should have ended the relationship, not changed. This upset her, and she emphatically stated that leaving had not even been considered by her. She loved me very much, but I couldn't grasp how consistent and logical her words were. I wondered why she would enter a relationship with another man if she wasn't dissatisfied. I questioned if I hadn't given her enough attention to make her feel wanted and loved. Though she assured me I did nothing wrong, she admitted that in our long-term relationship, she began taking these aspects for granted. In this situation, I might have done these actions for her out of a sense of duty or obligation. She also expressed uncertainty about our relationship, mentioning that she always noticed attention from other women. It made her feel inferior, as if she didn't have a special place in my life. She believed that without her presence, I would have had many alternatives. This fact attracted her to a partner much older than us, short and bald, with a big belly, completely opposite to me in appearance. She mentioned seeing photos of his wife, an average middle-aged woman, normal but not particularly attractive compared to her. My wife, younger and more attractive, felt she had a special place in his heart. Thanks to his undivided attention, she felt incredibly confident and valuable. She found great pleasure in the intense, almost obsessive desire he felt for her. She understood she was the only one causing such strong emotions in him. It had an intoxicating effect on her, almost like a potent substance. My curiosity got the best of me, and I asked if she had any suspicions about my loyalty. Surprisingly, she firmly denied any concerns, trusting my loyalty and devotion, believing I wouldn't betray her. However, when I dated other women during our breakup, her perception drastically changed, leading to a violent reaction. I questioned why I wasn't deserving of the same loyalty. She insisted she was loyal and devoted, stressing she would never change, but I reminded her of messages planning a physical relationship during a company event. To my surprise, she dismissed it, claiming to boost his ego, and the company wouldn't send her this year. She did it to support his faith and ensure a constant flow of attention. Curious, I asked if she was attracted to him. She grinned and denied it. Expressing my confusion, I explained her statement seemed contradictory. In response, she compared her SMS relationship to the man's use of explicit content to boost energy levels. There's enthusiasm and anticipation around her and his partner, indicating a strong bond, but it doesn't mean a lack of love. This contrasts with someone discussing their love partner, feeling cheerful and inspired by attention. As a result, her connection with me became even more pleasant. This made me reflect on how intense our relationship was. Before day, she talked about her feelings with great enthusiasm. According to her, this connection played a crucial role in boosting her self-esteem. She made it clear that her relationship with him had nothing to do with these feelings. It became obvious that these were the very problems she diligently addressed in therapy. However, I've never turned to a therapist because it's always been a difficult topic for me. Mental health problems were common in my father's family, who suffered from serious illnesses. Despite his condition, he managed to function well most of the time, experiencing occasional bouts of delirium. In contrast, his mother's condition was much more severe, leading to repeated placements in psychiatric clinics. Witnessing how his mother was subjected to extremely cruel and inadequate care, my father developed a distrust of mental health professionals. As a child of a father who feared doctors and hospitals, I also developed a deep-rooted distrust of mental health professionals. The constant worry that my father would be suddenly separated from his family during bouts of illness filled me with anxiety. Fortunately, I managed to avoid the same problems that my father and grandmother had. Having passed the age when symptoms usually appear, I became more inclined to ignore emerging signs. I decided to abandon the idea of marriage counseling after one meeting with 2 psychotherapists left me extremely uncomfortable. Now, I don't know how to overcome the emotional burden I carry. Perhaps therapy could be beneficial, but I'm afraid my spouse can only share what's beneficial to her. It's a dilemma. When we arrived at our destination, we started packing my aunt's belongings. Spending time with my uncle has become a routine, but there's always a strange feeling when sorting out someone's things after they pass away. The first time I felt this was when my father passed away. It struck me that all their possessions remained, but they were no longer there. Their whole life fit into objects, many of which might seem insignificant to us, but were important to them. Unfortunately, we'll never grasp the reasons for their attachments. In a somber atmosphere, we returned home, reflecting on the challenging process of sorting out my aunt's things, going over our detailed conversation, feeling its weight, exhausted by the long day. We delved into our relationship and contemplated seeking marriage counseling. Despite my doubts, I promised her to seriously consider this idea. I'm unsure how to interpret the details of her affair and the person involved. Should I trust her story? And even if I do, will it bring me any comfort or upset me more? I'm not sure yet. Our conversation went deeper than before, and driving played a role, allowing us to open up without looking into each other's eyes. It was almost like being in a confession booth. Opening up about some problems seems more pleasant. Maybe this will help us move forward, whether it strengthens the marriage or leads to a breakup. Nevertheless, it's progress, and I find encouragement in the fact that we both persevered through the discomfort. I managed not to withdraw, a positive step. She overcame her defensive attitude, which had hindered our conversations in the past. I may have contributed to her tendency to downplay some issues. I'm not saying her act wasn't serious. It does jeopardize the relationship. However, in my view, Mike's wife's infidelity was much more severe. She had an affair with a mutual friend they spent time with, a friend her husband also considered close. Throughout the story, it was clear she repeatedly had an affair with her partner, even within their shared home and bed. Reflecting on it, I admitted that if my wife had shown even a fraction of such disrespect, I would have ended the relationship quickly. I firmly believe that if she had taken their relationship beyond the virtual space, I would have left without hesitation. This part of the conversation troubled me, but I commend my wife's courage for reporting the affair to HR, given the company policy against fraternization. I also informed the other person's spouse that I would take action if she didn't, stressing the importance of proper behavior to delay the divorce process. I'm not sure how much credit is due to her, but the unfaithful wife eventually quit her job after the situation became public. Otherwise, she might have faced dismissal, though it's doubtful considering her experience and professional mentor role. However, this would have caused complications and led to his dismissal. Apparently, the betrayed spouse also decided to divorce him, and my wife and I are working on preserving our family, gradually rebuilding our faithful and spiritual connections. I've always aimed to do what's right, following the simple idea: treat others the way you want to be treated. These are the principles I try to live by, and I've made an effort to stick to them. Yet even though I never meant to hurt anyone, spoke harshly, or avoided responsibility for my mistakes, leading a good life turns out to be surprisingly tough. In summary, I consistently choose the morally upright path when faced with challenges. I present facts in a friendly manner when addressing others' errors and acknowledge my own faults. Despite my dedication to these values, a major life event took me by surprise. I was just going about my life, unaware of any warning signs, when it happened. Update: returning from a 2-day conference in Texas, I was met with a surprise from my wife. In the kitchen, Casey and our kids were laughing. When I inquired about the source of their amusement, the atmosphere shifted. Casey didn't ask. She told me to sit down. She suggested that I take a seat, and she waved some papers in my face. There were adoption papers among them, and she explained that she wanted Jeff to adopt the kids. Assertively, she stated that she wasn't asking for anything except the house. According to Casey, I should sign the papers because she believed I wanted the best for the children, and then we could move on. She said all this in a cool and composed manner. My wife of 12 years had just handed me divorce papers and adoption forms for our 3 kids. My son, Devin, gave me a little smirk. Devin was 10. Joy, my daughter, didn't even bother looking at me. She was 9 and busy with her iPod, not bothered about losing her father. Patrick, my 7-year-old, was the only one speaking up. Patrick explained that Jeff had a big house and that they liked him, as if that would make everything okay. I just sat there, looking at Casey and the kids like they were crazy. I wondered if she was high or drunk, but there was no drink smell. So, why this sudden divorce? Casey dropped the papers on the counter and gave me a check for half our bank accounts, demanding the kids to take my bags to my truck. Unbelievable. They had packed my bags before I got home and waited for the right moment to spring it on me. I asked Casey with a slightly menacing tone if she thought I was going somewhere. She replied that I was moving out and asked if I hadn't been listening. I retorted, saying that this is my family's house. My parents said I could live here long before we got married. I didn't recall her name being on anything tied to this house. I didn't know why she wanted a divorce, but she wasn't taking my parents' house. I shouted that she could leave, but I was staying in this house. Casey rolled her eyes, and realizing she couldn't win, changed her orders and yelled at the kids to pack their bags. They had to change their plans and go to Jeff's house. I finally asked who in the heck Jeff was, and Casey responded that he's the man who's been with her while I'm at work. She wasn't guilty or remorseful. Casey showed nothing but disrespect and contempt for me. I looked at my kids for support, and my daughter told her brothers to hurry up, stating that Jeff can give them a better life. She added that Mom loves him, and so do we. My sons nodded in agreement. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. They all headed toward Casey's car. I told Casey not to touch that car, explaining that I pay for it, and it's in my name. I instructed my son Duck to call his sorry pals and tell them to pick all of them up. Casey and the kids looked back at me, and all of them, the kids as well as Casey, flipped me the bird. I was beyond angry. I had worked for this family, and they ditched me for some money. I did what any normal man would do. I got really drunk. For the first time in my life, I hated somebody. I hated this Jeff guy with a passion. But more than him, I hated my family. I realized that it wasn't all him. My so-called family had chosen to betray me. Once I had sobered up the next morning, I cleaned myself up and went online to find a lawyer. I made an appointment for the next day at noon. They love him so much. I decided to give them what they asked for. My attorney looked over the agreement and told me to sign it before Casey changed her mind. I signed it, and my lawyer sent it back. Casey didn't even ask for child support. In the blink of an eye, with the stroke of a pen, I no longer had a wife or kids. My family tossed me aside like old bread. So much for staying together until the kids leave or growing old together. Update: 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Like everything else, I changed over time. I threw myself into work, returned to college, and earned my master's and PhD. Now, I was Dr. Billy, PhD CPA. Many find accounting dull, but it somehow matched my life. I chose to start my own office, a boutique operation catering to high-net-worth clients with personalized attention. Through word of mouth, my client base grew, and by the end of my second year, I was saving a significant amount. I met Patty, a wonderful woman who shared my values and interests. A bit taller than Casey, with curves in the right places. By the end of the 4th year, my firm needed more space, so I bought a 5-story office building instead of renting. Patty and I loved it so much that we got married on the 4th floor, a small but festive event. Perhaps I enjoyed myself too much, because a few months later, Patty revealed she was pregnant. I wished for more alone time with my wife, as my life had been improving over the last 6 years. However, I was shocked when Casey served me with child support papers, asking for $3,000 a month and $432,000 in back child support. It seemed absurd, since I hadn't heard from them in 7 years. I laughed and handed the papers to my attorney. After a good laugh, my attorney called Casey's attorney, discovering Casey was broke and alone. She had learned about my success, remarriage, and growing family. Casey's husband, Jeff, disappeared, and a week later she was served with divorce papers. Jeff refused to pay child support, claiming coercion by Casey to sign adoption forms. The judge declared the adoptions void. With their divorce finalized and money gone, I became Casey's next option. Casey involved my parents, who had stayed in touch with her since she left me. They sided with her without telling me about their contact. Casey played the actress, and my parents believed her story. My dad was the first to talk to me, urging forgiveness and family reunification. I reminded him of my remarriage, and my father suggested fixing my marriage to Casey, leaving Patty and taking care of the kids. I lost respect for him, asked him to leave, and my mom made a similar request. They insisted that if I didn't take Casey back, I could move out, and they would give her the house. Despite an eviction notice, I didn't mind as the sale on my new house was closing the next day. Remarkably, when paying cash, people go the extra mile to get things done. Update: the next week, my parents came to the house and found it empty. Casey and her kids moved in the following day. It's been 2 years since then, and I haven't talked to my parents, Casey, or her kids. Patty and I now have 4 kids, and our business is thriving. This year, I received the Businessman of the Year award for our area. A wonderful photo of me and my family appeared in the local paper. Proudly, I accepted the award and credited Patty for most of it. I told the audience that without my wife Patty, there would be no award for me. She is my rock. While delivering my speech, my parents walked in with Casey. Casey approached the stage and called me a neglectful father. She told everyone that I abandoned my kids and her, blaming Patty for ruining our marriage. I believe my attorney anticipated this. He seemed to have a sense that Casey would use this event to attack me and promote her false story. He used a remote to control a projector at the side of the hall. Private investigators are quite resourceful in uncovering hidden details and using advanced technology. It was astonishing. A film started playing on the blank wall, showing Casey and her attorney discussing revoking the adoption papers I had signed in the parking lot outside his office. She informed her lawyer that the court voiding them would be more beneficial than what she had given him that afternoon. They also discussed a plan to medicate Patty and film her cheating on me. Then Casey would come in and mend my broken heart. She also revealed how she manipulated my parents to be her puppets, threatening that they wouldn't see their grandkids if they didn't comply. When the short video ended, Casey's attorney, Finchett, tried to leave quietly through a side door but was stopped by the chief of police. Some judges in the audience took an interest in the tape. I glanced at my parents, then walked over to my wife and kids, helped them with their coats, and left. Outside, I kissed Patty, and we headed for the car. Just as I finished putting the kids in the car, my parents called my name. I got in my car without looking back and drove away. I didn't see them again until I was called to court to testify against Casey and her lawyer. After giving my testimony, I left the courtroom. My father was waiting outside. My father expressed how sorry he and my mother were and asked me to give them a chance to make things up. He mentioned the 3 kids who missed me and the 4 grandkids they had never met. My father urged me to find it in my heart to forgive them and put the family back together. I just looked and turned away. After a moment, I stopped and told him I would think about it. Update: Casey received a 3-month jail sentence and 4 years of probation. Her lawyer was disbarred for conspiring to commit fraud against the court and me. The Child Welfare Department warned that the kids would go to foster care unless my parents or I took them. I asked my parents to take them. My dad said I'd have to forgive them someday. My dad questioned if wanting to be part of the grandkids' lives was so terrible, emphasizing that they were old and would miss most of their lives. He asked if I was heartless, unable to see that she made a mistake. I explained that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in their lives, but Casey wasn't just mistaken. She was cold-hearted and got what she deserved. The kids chose him. I reminded him of his past words, saying that some things can't be forgiven, and he also mentioned the road to hell being paved with good intentions. I pointed out that he turned his back on me when Casey lied, cheated, turned the kids against me, and he still sided with her. Now, he wanted me to act like nothing had changed. I told him that he's old enough to know he made the wrong choice, and now he has to live with the consequences. That was a decade ago. Casey didn't learn her lesson. She married again, attempted the same deceit as she did with me, but it didn't end well. Her husband caught her with her lover and kicked them both. My kids with Casey are grown, and Devin and Patrick are in prison. Joy, before anything went wrong, came to our house, seeking to be part of our family. Patty believed Joy had been misled by her mother and insisted we take her in to help her live a moral and productive life. My parents met my kids before they passed away, leaving everything to my judgment. They asked me to distribute their assets fairly among their 7 grandchildren in my will. Patty and I will soon be empty nesters, and I'll cherish having my wife back all to myself. For some, Billy is seen as weak for not fighting to keep his family or for walking away. Some things just aren't worth the fight. My name is Rick, and during high school and college, people often thought of me as a computer geek. While I'm not the best-looking guy, I stand at 6 feet tall, weigh around 170 pounds, and have light brown hair. I've always been into computers, programs, and games, and anyone with computer troubles usually came to me for help. That's how I met Karen, who eventually became my wife. 7 years ago, we were both students at the University of Wisconsin. Karen studied ABA legal studies while I focused on computer science. She aspired to be a corporate lawyer, and I aimed to delve deeper into computers and programs. When Karen struggled with her computer system, a professor from the computer science department referred her to me. I helped her grasp the system, and we not only became efficient collaborators, but also good friends, spending a lot of time together. Now, let me introduce Karen. She's an attractive 5 feet 4 inches tall, blonde with a stunning 36-24-36 figure. She's not just good looking, she also has a fantastic personality and easily connects with everyone. I genuinely liked her, and over time, I fell deeply in love with her. Karen, in turn, got to know me and fell in love with me too. It might sound surprising, but stranger things have happened, although I can't think of any right now. Update. After 2 years in school, Karen realized she wouldn't achieve her goal of becoming an attorney. However, she remained interested in legal work and applied for jobs as a legal secretary. She landed a position with a major brokerage firm and quickly adapted to the job. We got married within 2 months, and she continued working to support us while I finished school. Over the last 5 years, her hard work, dedication, and friendliness helped her climb the corporate ladder, and she was eventually transferred to the Chicago headquarters to be the assistant to the manager of the firm's legal department. I earned a degree in computer science and decided to make a good living by writing computer game programs. Starting my own business, I've created numerous popular games that you or your kids would recognize. I've made a substantial amount of money and no longer need to work as hard. We moved to Highland Park, a suburb of Chicago, along Lake Michigan. Since we were both successful in our work, Karen and I have built a comfortable life together, working because we enjoy it, not out of necessity. To avoid getting bored, I secretly started another company in Milwaukee, about an hour's commute, investigating computer software fraud, CSFI Inc. Through confidential contacts at the Institute of Computer Technology, I began with a small client list that has continued to grow through word-of-mouth advertising. CSFI Inc. now has about 150 clients and might be working on 5 or 6 projects at any given time, generating profits exceeding $3 million last year. I hired a competent office manager, Carrie, and contracted computer experts like myself for investigation work. We rotate them on projects so they don't become too familiar to the customer. The only actual employees of the company are Carrie and me and the investigators. Each gets paid a percentage of the fee for the projects they do for me. Due to the huge profits in the software industry, the need for confidentiality and secrecy is extreme, so I've always maintained anonymity. In fact, no one at the company knows me, not even Carrie, because I always wear a disguise to hide my true identity when I investigate. I even wore a disguise when I hired Carrie to keep my involvement a secret. Over the years, I've become adept at developing new disguises to fool everyone. When I investigate a case, I get paid like the rest of the investigation staff, except my pay goes to a separate account I've set up under an alias. The majority of the investigations are done by my contracted staff, but about once a quarter, I take on a job myself for fun. Karen is unaware of CSFI Inc., so I use the pretext of going to Milwaukee to meet with my game distributor to get away for a few days to do the investigation. Actually, all of my computer game business is done through the internet for CSFI Inc., though. I drive to the company's apartment in Milwaukee, park my car in the garage, put on my disguises, and then drive a company car, currently a Buick, to the office to pick up the investigation materials. I go wherever I need to do the job, sometimes local, but sometimes in NY or C. I finish the job, go back to Milwaukee, reverse the process, and go home. You might be thinking that while I'm traveling, I'm cheating, taking every opportunity to date women and cheat on my wife. But nothing could be further from the truth. I love my wife beyond my own understanding and would never do anything to hurt her or my marriage. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Karen, and that's why I'm writing this story. I personally took on an investigation for Marcos's software to determine if one of their programmers was selling source code to a competitor. Jeff Marcos designed a program to track securities transactions, and I thought it would give me insight into Karen's work, so I jumped on that investigation myself. The company is in Oak Brook, another suburb of Chicago. I thought it might be fun to explore restaurants and clubs in my hometown while in disguise. Who knew? Maybe I would encounter some friends I could toy with. Little did I know what I would be really encountering and what I would be investigating. I had all the information needed from Carrie, my office manager, and I set myself up in the Drake Hotel in Oak Brook, a short drive from Marcos Software. I arrived at Marcos, and after a short wait, was greeted by Jeff Marcos. He was tall, dark, and handsome, a replica of the traditional pattern for a man that women would find attractive. Jeff was also very outgoing and friendly, and had a presence about him that put me at ease, and I really found myself liking the man. He invited me into his office and talked to me about what he suspected and how he thought I might approach the investigation. He set me up with everything I needed right there in his office and told all his people that I was a special projects manager with one of their customers there to work out the bugs on the program application with my company. I thought it would work out quite well, so we went with that approach. Update. On the second day of my stay, I confirmed Jeff's suspicions. One of his team members, a programmer named Tom, was indeed selling source code, and I found out exactly how he was doing it. While I was working on my report, Jeff's cell phone rang. which was placed on his desk next to me. Jeff wasn't in the room, so I glanced at the caller ID and was shocked to see Karen and my wife's cell phone number. Initially, I thought about grabbing the phone to surprise her, thinking her company might be using Jeff's software and imagining her shock upon discovering I was working there. However, I realized it would jeopardize keeping CSFI Inc. and my identity a secret. Instead, I chuckled to myself about the irony of the situation. Jeff returned and called my wife back. My amusement turned into heartbreak and sickness when I overheard him say, "Karen, I'm glad you called. I had a wonderful time last night. Can we meet at Morton's for dinner at 6:30 p.m.? Okay, I'll see you there. And afterward, we'll go to your place for dessert. Bye, beauty." I was stunned, feeling like I could be knocked out of my chair with a feather. I must have looked like a zombie, and the shock made me feel nauseous. My heart pounded so hard, I thought I might have a heart attack. I excused myself, went to the men's room, and sat in the stall until my heart settled, trying to comprehend how Karen could do this. I thought she loved me as much as I loved her. Yet, she was meeting Jeff again, and he spoke of enjoying the previous night. The things he said to her hinted at a level of relationships beyond what you'd say unless you'd had closeness. I couldn't fathom it. I had no inkling that Karen had been cheating on me. Our closeness life was satisfying, and she never complained about unmet needs. I was utterly bewildered and couldn't comprehend what was happening. And throughout all of this, my heart was breaking. How could she betray me, someone she supposedly loved? Did she love me at all? Was my marriage genuine, or was it just a facade? I genuinely felt like my world was collapsing at that moment. Everything I had worked for was for Karen and me, and now I was uncertain. Once I calmed down enough to think clearly, I decided I needed to confirm my suspicions instead of relying on the limited evidence I had. Once I gathered all the facts, or as many as possible, I planned to take action. I returned to the office with Jeff and focused on finishing the project, knowing I would dedicate the next few days to uncovering the truth. Sitting there was challenging because I wanted to confront him, but I understood that it would be a mistake. To make matters worse, Jeff had a big grin on his face and apologized for his comments in front of me. He explained, "I'm sorry for what I said, but that woman is attractive. I met her a few weeks ago at a customer's office and we hit it off. At the moment, I despised him, but I could see why Karen might be interested because he was easy to talk to." He continued, "She told me that the next time her husband, she calls him Computer Boy, leaves town for business, she'll call me, and we'll meet up." Although it hurt, I held it together. She said she married Computer Boy because she knew he'd become rich, providing her with a comfortable life, while she could still have affairs with attractive men like me. He laughed again. I questioned her love for him, and she claimed she loved him, but also enjoyed extramarital affairs. I couldn't believe the information I gathered from him without revealing my identity or intentions. It became clear it was indeed my Karen, especially with the Computer Boy reference. It seemed evident she had cheated on me with him and possibly others throughout our marriage. While I knew a lot, I needed more proof before executing a plan. I informed Jeff that I needed to leave for the rest of the day and would return the following morning. In my car, I called Karen on my cell phone. She acted sweet and loving, expressing how much she missed me, making me nauseous. Aware of the deception, I asked about her plans for the day, and she mentioned working and possibly having dinner with friends. I informed her it would be another day or two before I returned home and said I would call her later. She insisted I not call because she didn't know when she would be home from her evening out with friends. In reality, she just didn't want any interruptions while being with Jeff. I felt sick to my stomach. Update. I felt the need to catch her cheating, and I knew exactly how to do it. On my way home, I went to the electronics store and purchased 5 new mini wireless surveillance cameras and a modem. This would allow me to monitor various areas in the house: the kitchen, living room, family room, master bedroom, and guest bedroom. I wasn't sure where she would take him, but I wanted to cover any possible location. When I got home, I used the remote to turn off the security camera, parked my car in the garage to avoid suspicion, entered the house, and rewound the tape to erase any evidence of my arrival. I installed the surveillance cameras, connected them to the modem and recorder in my basement workshop, allowing me to access the output online and monitor the entire house discreetly. Satisfied with my setup, I left the house, got into my car, and left the driveway. I drove around the block and reactivated the security cameras with the remote as I passed by. Unless she scrutinized the security tape closely and noticed the time break, she wouldn't realize anything had happened at home. Besides, Karen never bothered checking the tapes. That was my responsibility. After completing all these tasks, I started feeling hungry and went to a nearby pizza place to eat. I had a couple of beers, wanting to stay sharp as I kept an eye on what was happening at home. Later, I went to the hotel, set up my computer, and waited. Despite my hopes that it was all a mistake and she wasn't cheating, my emotions overwhelmed me, and I broke down in tears. Around 8 p.m., I saw her car pull into the garage, and it was clear she was alone. My heart skipped a beat, thinking maybe nothing was going to happen. However, a couple of minutes later, the security camera was turned off, and I couldn't see the driveway anymore. Switching to the kitchen camera, I witnessed her entering, dressed in one of my favorite outfits, a short black dress, rather low-cut with spaghetti straps. I loved seeing her in that outfit until that very moment. I knew she wouldn't wear it to go out with friends for dinner. She wore it to entice someone, usually me. But tonight, it wasn't me. Tears streamed down my face again as I realized this wasn't a mistake. Karen was not who or what I thought she was. I didn't have to wait long for Jeff to enter the kitchen. Apparently, Karen left the garage door open, and he parked his car in my spot to avoid the neighbors seeing it. When he walked in, Karen embraced him, and they shared a kiss. While he rubbed her back, she suggested moving to the bedroom. They grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and left the kitchen. I switched to the living room camera and saw them pass on their way to the bedrooms. Strangely, I hoped she would choose the guest room over our bed, though I knew it was a ridiculous thought. However, that wasn't the case. When I switched to the guest room camera, nothing was there. Switching to our bedroom, they were sitting on the bed kissing. Karen opened the wine and poured each a glass, toasting to a handsome man in great closeness. They drank half the glass and set them down. Jeff stood up, and Karen opened his pants. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I wasn't turned on, and I didn't want it to happen. If it seemed like the first time, I would have stopped it, but there were signs it wasn't. I needed proof before deciding what to do. Everything I feared happened. Karen praised their encounter and suggested doing it again tomorrow night. My heart broke when she expressed she might not let me have bad life with her again. Until that moment, I thought she loved me and just wanted more closeness. I hoped confronting her would make her stop out of love for me. But with that comment, I realized she didn't love or respect me. I knew our marriage was over because I couldn't live with someone who didn't love and respect me, no matter how much I loved her. My love died, and even though I never expected it, I had to mourn its loss. I turned everything off, got into bed, and cried until morning. I woke up, saw my swollen eyes and messy appearance in the mirror, and knew it was going to be a tough day. Despite the pain, I understood what I had to do. Update. I had been considering how to end our marriage and, frankly, how to hurt her like she hurt me. I know seeking revenge is immature, but I felt I needed to hurt her for my healing to start. I didn't harbor strong resentment towards Jeff, but it didn't seem right for him to be involved with another man's wife, break up their marriage, and not face consequences. I wanted my revenge, and maybe then I could move on. I went to Jeff's office to execute my plan. As computer boy, it was easy for me to make it happen without leaving any clues. I didn't even want to physically damage him anymore. I just wanted my revenge, and the cost would be high for both of them. During Jeff's staff meeting, I took his keys, had copies made, and accessed his house where he stored copies of his source code. Although I already had access to his computer system, I hacked into his security files, obtained passwords, and wrote a virus program to delete his source code from every drive on his network, including his home and customers' computers. Activating the program would change all passwords and destroy all copies of his program permanently. Then I hacked into my wife's work computer, used her password to transfer $200,000 from my business account to Jeff's, and then to an account I set up for him in the Grand Cayman Islands. I erased the money trail, anticipating that a skilled analyst could eventually trace it. I don't know if Jeff and Karen got back together on Wednesday night, but it didn't matter to me anymore. On Thursday morning, I triggered the virus program. By Friday at 9 a.m., I handed Jeff a report on the software code theft and informed him that CSFI would bill him for my services, knowing he wouldn't pay. I left his office with him expressing pleasure in knowing me, and I thought, if he only knew. But I smiled, shook his hand, and wished him luck. I went to his home, used the copied keys to find archived copies of his program, took them with me, and headed to Milwaukee. In my apartment, I burned them all, seeking revenge without personal profit. I stayed there on Thursday night, waiting for the fallout. Friday morning, I informed Carrie that I completed the project, and Marco's software could be built. She said she'd handle it, and my fee would be sent to my account. I drove home and found Karen crying. She told me she was sent home pending an investigation into securities fraud involving money from our business account. I acted shocked and asked for details. She mentioned money transferred to Jeff Marcos, someone she met a couple of weeks ago at the office, but didn't know well. At 9 a.m., chaos erupted when everything went dead as everyone was working. None of the programmers could access the system. Jeff struggled to get in, and the phones were ringing non-stop because their customers couldn't use the tracking program. I didn't witness it, but I knew it was happening as I described. Later, I found out Jeff had fired Tom for stealing source code, and when everything went haywire, he blamed Tom again. Well, Tom wasn't innocent, so he can face the consequences. As a programmer, I believe anyone messing with source code should be penalized. The $200,000 was traced to Jeff's account, and he denied knowledge, accusing Karen. She, in turn, denied knowing anything, blaming Jeff. During the investigation, I stayed calm until Jeff revealed they had a close relationship. I confronted Karen, and she admitted it, apologizing and crying for forgiveness. She claimed it was a one-time thing due to loneliness during my extended absence. I knew it was a lie, but didn't bother challenging it. It didn't matter anymore. Jeff was found guilty of securities fraud, fined $50,000, and sentenced to 6 months in jail, serving only 3 for good behavior. However, upon release, he lost his program and company. Last I heard, he worked as a programmer for a competitor, and ironically, Tom worked there too. Karen lost her job, and unable to move past her infidelity, I served her with divorce papers, citing the infidelity clause. Being a computer geek, her settlement was only 10% of our net worth. She was fined $50,000 for securities fraud and received 3 years probation. Luckily, she avoided prison, but with only $150,000 left, she couldn't afford a decent house in Chicago. She moved to Milwaukee and became a waitress in a bar. While she might do well, she won't enjoy the life we had together. I hope she always remembers how much I loved her and feels the hurt when thinking of me. Update. I sold the Highland Park house and moved to an apartment in Milwaukee. I still had $1.8 million from our shared funds and an additional $1.2 million in the CSFI Inc. account. So, I thought it was time to enjoy my wealth. I sold the company for another $4 million and decided it was time for Carrie to know her real boss. She mentioned she knew it was me all along, regardless of any disguise I used. Gotta appreciate that woman. And I do, often and well, and she loves me in return. Neither of us works full-time now. We're just savoring the rewards of our hard work. We got married soon after my divorce was finalized, and we're expecting our first child this December.